Damas y caballeros, bon tardi, bombini, awe tardi na nos workshop di Fundação Autismo. Prometo nos kumingsam, yung anuncio importante. Mi querayama pa dilanti Byron y Kay. Ando mi querayama Carolina también, pues esta explique hope más mijo kumi. Aquí banda Byron.
Buon tardi. I was told I'm not going to speak today, but here I am. We're going to
Very good. Hopi bong. Hopi danke das seta hopi importante pa nos sa tarde aquí nos misako nos ta costumbra batimang pero awe lo mi recordamos o varios viajes en caso vos lo mi dako ta importante pa nos así silent applause. Bueno, mi ta pasa over na inglés awe tarde ta baita un combinación de papiamento y inglés. Si tiene cualquier pregunta en cualquier otro idioma mi te quiere nos lo por contestar aquí. Welcome to our ministers. Bombini, feliz tarde. Su Excelencia Herlin Cruz, Vice Prime Minister, Minister of Kingdom Relations, Education, Youth, Innovation, and Sport. Welcome. Welcome to Mervin Wyatt Ras, Minister of Health, Social Affairs, Elderly Care, and Addiction Care. Bombini, tarde. Members of the National Autism Committee and colleagues from the healthcare, social, public, and educational sector. Welcome, bombini un viaja más, nos está contento de timboso awe tarde. Before we start, I just have a few quick housekeeping announcements. First of all, coffee and tea, self-service. Feel yourself welcome to take your coffee and your tea. It's free and it's in the back of the room. Under each table, there's a power strip. So if you need to charge your phone or your laptop if needed, you're welcome to do so. And finally, after the last session, we invite you to join us for a networking moment, a meet and greet with the speakers. And it's just a moment to chat, unwind, and after all, it's Friday, right? So wine is provided by H&H Fine Wines. Ladies and gentlemen, today's goal is to explore the intersectionality of gender, mental health, and neurodivergence, highlighting how misdiagnosis impacts women's mental well-being and how we can improve recognition and diagnosis of autism, especially in the Aruban context. Thank you, before we continue, to those who made this day possible. Fundación Autismo Aruba, the National Autism Committee, Marriott and Stellaris Casino, H&H Fine Wines and Spirits, and Aruba Aloe. We would like to start with an opening speech from our ministers. Please help me welcome with the silent applause Minister, Her Excellency Minister Mervin Wyatt Ras.
Good afternoon, buon tardi. Buon tardi na collega minister Herlin Cruz, también miembro de Fundación Autismo y su presidente, en Comisión Nacional de Autismo, tour profesional lang presente y otro invitado lang. Me está sumamente honra de la palabra a tarde, na inicio de workshop aquí, organizado de Fundación Autismo y otros stakeholders. Me quero agradecer, na primeiro lugar, senhora Carolina Span, para invitar-me para dar discurso cortico. E o tema, me por visa de autismo, of a spectrum de autismo, of a autism spectrum disorder, está referido também ao tarde na diferença também de muita mulher e muito homem, o qual me quero estar muito importante para assim. Autismo não está uma sentença, mucha of persona que está autista, está único e correto não especial. É uma persona que tem direito para decidir cuido e ser protegido, direito para ajuda e sostém adequado, direito para a oportunidade para desenvolver, direito para a escola, direito para hora acabar a escola básico e por seguir outro trajeto e também desenvolver seu talento. Direito para a trabalho e ser reconhecido, direito de inclusão e forma parte de nossa comunidade. Sin embargo, de nossa comunidade, não tem hora pessoa que está diferente, que está especial, está hora tratar da mesma maneira. É de importância que nós reconhecer isso e trabalhar conjuntamente na inclusão de pessoas que está diferente. Para esse motivo aqui, me está muito contente ao tarde de mirar profissional de diferentes disciplinas, diferentes departamentos e também organização que não junto para assim intercambiar e trabalhar também na awareness tocante de autismo. Para Kiko, é importante para señalar e diagnosticar temprano, para sobre em prática nossa topa hopi maior não que takana que não eu também de Aruban de caixa para muralha e não haya diagnóstico, isso é hopi importante. Para em todo caso é referência da tempan e assim é ajuda por começar também tempan. Bane dizer para barra é wachtlijst, por isso também nossa haya hopi viaja e remarca que tem que guardar para mim que haya teste of haya ajudança. É hopi importante que nós podamos conjuntamente para barra e wachtlijst. Para chegar também na trato op maat, para sobre cada mucha está indivíduo, cada mucha está único e tem o direito de ser tratado de uma forma adequada para mucha mesmo para seu desenvolvimento. Também para conjuntamente criar visão e também planear a curto prazo, para nós temos programa também duradouro para por lograr para dado momento que tem autismo e por cada caminho den cuido, den guia escolar e logra também que está estudo, porque não está sobre pessoa autista que não acaba a escola, que porta profissional, nós topa vários profissionais que está autista, que na início que não está young, não está diagnosticar, sin embargo, que na grande não porta mais tranquilo que não haya o diagnóstico de autista e por funcionar também em comunidade como profissional e fazer trabalho e fazer uma diferença também de nossa comunidade. Também é importante a trobe parte de inclusão, quer que cada de nós está trabalhando em diferentes departamentos, hope viaja, botar constatar que departamento não tem certo limite não caminha que tem viaja e não logra para mucha cruza o limite para assim é por hora tratar nós conjuntamente awe tá importante também para papia de limite nang de diferente visão nang meta nang de cada departamento, pero conosco cruza essa aqui nang também mirando é muito central, passo essa aí nos tem que é muito sempre único com direito e com essa central dentro do qual nós fazemos. Por vista que de nós banda nós tem propósito de lei entregar para landsbesluit para assim se possível com muito não somente que tem problema de saúde mental, mas também muito que tem problema com autismo ou que tem ontwikkelingsstoornis por haia dança temprano desde 0 para 16 anos. E a proposição aqui nós está bezig aqui conjuntamente com o processo de landspaketten, para assim nós por chegar na passa lei aqui, e landsbesluit aqui, a outra vai virar lei, do parlamento, para assim nós por ter a lei, para assim maior na porraia sustento de trempang, para sobre maior que tem com autismo, e tem que cana processo, e tem viaja e não por laga suyu, só na casa, e tem que buscar cuidado bota bisa toch especializar persona que por wakpe pessoa por poner crash maneira outra muito não tá bem ou tem que comprar certo material não especial tem que fazer teste tem que vai a fora do exterior para buscar dança para suyu que men tem hobby gasto não encerrar ora maior haia e diagnóstico ou buscando o diagnóstico se suyu tá autista sim ou não que men nos quer dona dança e também nós espera como governo, maneira que nós toma nota de Comissão Nacional de Autismo, caminha que nós por duna e sostém, meu colega também está aqui não presente, de forma que a Comissão também por chega na sua meta, que concluir sua meta, para assim bem com manejo, dirigir, para assim nós por atender com pessoas que tem espectro de autismo. Com apoio e ajuda temprana, compreensão, empatia, educação de família, comunidade, inclusão, nos pode ajudar muito jovem e adulto também com autismo. Muito não para não acabar na escola, dos trajeto aqui dentro do trabalho e dentro da comunidade, sobre essa aqui está parte que o viaja, nós não tá papel de comunidade também, nós temos que, se nós que papel de inclusão tá de suma importante que a comunidade também tá aceitar pessoa diferente. O PBA diz sobre pessoa não tá quadra com o tipo de pessoa que nós temos expectativa de nós não tá compreender, ou nós tá discriminar, ou nós tá poner banda, nós tá bully. Bem que remarca negativo tocante a pessoa que está diferente, sendo que de nossa comunidade está na cada de nós para nós por fortificar de nossa comunidade, para assim nós por mirar a pessoa que está diferente como pessoa brilhante, que tem uma perspectiva diferente, que tem que amor e carinho e também sustém para assim não poder desenvolver maneira todo outro indivíduo de nossa comunidade. E é necessário em todo caso para nós por señalar, então aí que enfatizar a importância para señalar miratura e característica especialmente ora como muito não vai creche, não vai escola, doctor de casa, especialista de mucha, que por mira e señala para assim por diagnosticar trempang para mucha por haia e dança de trempang, para so mais trempang e haia e dança, melhor para su desenvolvimento. E nós temos hopi expertise na Aruban, mita weita awe, com hopi orgulho também, mita bisa, com mita weita persona que me conhece em veld, mas também persona que me não conhece. Então, hopi expertise para assim trabalhar de uma forma mais eficiente e efetiva para donar e muito que tem autista caminho bacana e melhor desenvolvimento e participação de nossa comunidade. Mita desejar tour, especialmente na organizadora, senhora Carolina Span, em especial com a visitami também. Desejamos a turcos bom avetari para discussão de workshop fructífero Pasina nos por crear awareness, nos por discutir, diferenciar também entre muita mulher e muita homem. Para característica não e chega na ponto não caminha que nós podemos junto para sobra que muito não aqui mestre de nós e com ânimo nós podemos conjuntamente nós podemos inspirar outro para assim nós logra meta não grande para muito não com autismo na Aruba. Mas danke.
Masya danki Su Excelência Mervin Wyatt Ras. Nós continua con nos programa hoy tarde. We continue with our program this afternoon, welcoming on stage Her Excellency Minister Gerlin Cruz.
Buon tardi. Good afternoon to our international speaker present. To all of you, welcome. I'm standing here this afternoon not only as the Minister of Education, Youth, Sports and Innovation, and a few other ministries, but I'm standing here as well as a parent, mother, daughter, friend, and hoping that part of this session today will also help us keep on educating ourselves on this subject. The most important aspect of this development is having a good education or a good educated community on what we are missing out with having such talented people as part of our community, because that's the reality. Educating ourselves, but also educating others on how or what are we missing out, what are we not tapping in, because of not giving the support necessary and the structural needs for these people to also have the same opportunities all of us have without having any other limitations. Please allow me to also share some words in our native language papiamento. Buon tardi na cada un dibusunang. Para mí, en realidad, último semana, de responsabilidad como ministro, un momento para realizar y reconocer que hobby vez nos pone énfasis arriba en verdad hobby reto nan que nos tiene nos comunidad anto énfasis aí te pone nos toch desviar of kita e focus de oportunidade nan que tem também de nos comunidad e o grupo aqui tá um grupo que te brinda hobby talento que nos mester duna nan e forma para empoderar nan mes e em certo momento nós te senti tem viaja que é hobby difícil para nós chegar aí nan. Se nós solamente começa a reconhecer o brilho e a criatividade que está viva e o talento que está viva em cada personagem. O bem se visa nós chamamos hobby nan muito nan autista, pero o que isso eigenlijk significa? Para mim, personalmente, não significa nada outro que uma pessoa que no momento aqui, mestre tem um lugar mais especial ainda de nossa comunidade, de nosso sistema educacional, de nosso desenvolvimento, de nossa formação, de nossas skills. Então, hobby vez, nós não está saliendo em busca de criar a oportunidade e estrutura não devido, mas nós está hobby viaja brainstorm largo arriba o impacto que isso aqui tem na nossa comunidade. Qual é o hobby importante para sobre a awareness creation, mestre sosode, pero mais que claro, me quer o poder que está viva de personagem aqui, que nasce com o talento aqui excepcional, me quer mais que turcos merece também para nós por duna não sustento devido e que atualmente o sistema que nós temos em comunidade não está oferecendo. Um rato passado, eu tinha uma reunião com o cabeçante da escola pública. Anto, na final de reunião, pergunta tocante inclusão a bem dilante. E no caso aqui não necessariamente autismo, pero também outro tipo de realidade que nós temos na nossa comunidade. Então, houve vez e pergunta também, como nós podemos atender com a situação aqui. Nós temos lugar para não, pero está difícil. Então, me pergunta se o lugar que nós temos para não é o lugar que de verdade não merece também. Então, nós temos pouco a pouco, não somente assim, o tipo de sessão aqui para nos papéis tópico, pero também realizar nos mês com mais nos reconhecer que nós temos grupo aqui como parte de nossa comunidade, como ser understanding extra, mas nós temos que guiar nos mês na estruturar o necessário para o futuro, para o dia para dia nós realizar que o grupo aqui, um grupo está virando mais grande também na nossa comunidade. Mito gente, mito põe ênfase arriba que está a oportunidade e aspecto positivo que tem. Verdade é reto, pero mito quer também é uma oportunidade para nós como comunidade realizar nos mês que nós estamos missing out arriba sina hope, de não donar o grupo aqui, lo qual em verdade não merece. Quanto talento, criatividade, deportista, toda sorte de coisas que nós por mencionar lista não largo a tarde. Mi desejo, não somente com a tarde, a mensagem aqui está guardado papel e compartilhar, riba que impacto tá. Só tem diferentes tópicos que lo touch a tarde, pero também que a hora que nós saímos fora de aqui não, nós está sentindo nos mais animar para donar de nós cada você porta de nossa família, e porta no trabalho, houve vezes hasta que nós não sabemos, que não aguardo identificar, pero que cada de nós sale animar para pensar como nós vai incluir a pessoa aqui em nossa vida diária. Quizás, me tenho homem chiquito, e te sabe, mami, tá tem roupa de desordem em classe, então me dolor de cabeça. Então me pensa, com ele tá para estar com a guarda diagnóstica, todo dia sinti essa aqui como peso para sobre ti esfera não que não está sentindo na casa de ninguém. Que coisa ele unifica para mim como mama, de que extremo está, com esse está impactar minha vida diária, com esse lota stress para mim como gente mulher, como mama, de trabalho como tem, então e mesmo custa suceder em cada nos vida, ora que nos topa, que retorna aqui nos dilante. Então, ojalá, me avisa, que nos cada awe, por compartilhar, dialogar, ribe tópico aqui, pero também que nos por sair e riba mensagem junto com nós, que nos saco eta sina, nos saco nos tem uma realidade, e realidade quizás está crescente, pero Kiko, nos cada está sali a tarde e hasi conjunto, pues aqui está esforço coletivo. Claro, sempre nos avisa governo, mas estruturar o necessário para o grupo aqui e para todo outro grupo, para nos garantizar inclusão, pero Kiko colectivamente também nos por hasi para animar outro, para buscar a solução necessária. Tem hope e acaba, está guardo hasi, pero sei seguro não é suficiente. Ojalá que a tarde seja uma tarde hope inspirativa para cada de vocês. E mais que outra coisa, para mim, de meu encargo de aspecto educacional, como por riba também, de lo qual como por nem meia tarde, para ajudar a seguir pensar como nós por criar melhor estrutura para understanding aqui, para sobre a maneira como avisa no início, nós estamos missing out arriba sina hope, de não oferecer o necessário e a estrutura devido para o grupo aqui. Junto com o colega, me seguro que sua paixão e amor também é hope grande para atender e donar de sua banda para o necessário, nos quer conjunto com o bolso, que estão que pensa e departamento não estão que ativamente como organização discutindo, dialogando sobre o tópico aqui, com pouco a pouco nos por estruturar para não somente a aceitação vir mais grande, pero também a possibilidade vira mais grande para o grupo aqui. Me estamos agradecido que me guardo invitar para a parte de opening de hoje tarde, pero também agradecido na comissão, fundação e estão com a carga e tópico aqui para hope tempo. Passou se estava 2-3 anos a passar, provavelmente of mas mes nos nota outra papia, mes um hopi, maneira nos ta papia awe, arriba e tópico assim é importante. Danki, na estanco ta zorg para nos tem a possibilidade para esse tipo de sessão aqui, para educar nos mes, para intercambiar pensamento, pero mais que outra coisa, danke para coletivamente sinta awe junto aqui não e turco está presente considerar quão importante é o tópico aqui está para dialogar awe tarde e wak com leu nos por chegar a sostener outro dentro da situação que nos portava nos experiência diariamente para coisa aqui. Nogmaals, danke Carolina pela invitação e danke para tudo que kubo ta hasi e na tur outro que também está parte do processo.
Thank you so much. Masha danki na nos minister na presente awe tarde. Introducing our first speaker for this afternoon. She is the president of Fundación Autismo Aruban and the National Autism Committee and works as a healthcare policy advisor with a background in health administration. With several years of experience in shaping healthcare policy and advocating for more inclusive systems, Carolina Span is committed to improving access, awareness, and support for neurodivergent individuals across Aruba. Her work focuses on integrating equity and intersectionality into healthcare frameworks, recognizing how overlapping identities such as gender, neurodivergence, and socio-cultural background can influence diagnosis, treatment, and long-term outcomes. Carolina has played a key role in organizing national initiatives around autism awareness and inclusion, bringing together professionals, families, and government stakeholders. Let's give her a big round of silent applause.
All right, buon tardi, good afternoon. So as it was already mentioned, we do have an international guest, so I will be doing my presentation in English, but during the presentations, each speaker will let us know in which language they will be speaking. And so many things on the screen, hold on. All right. So, as I already mentioned, I want to say thank you to the ministers for being present here today and for believing in this initiative. Thank you to all of our colleagues and professionals who are present here today. I know asking you to come for half an afternoon while you are very busy is asking something of you, but I do hope that it is a good afternoon and that you get to learn something or be refreshed in something that maybe you haven't thought about in a little bit. So before I start with my presentation, I do want to give a short explanation. So, and for the ones that don't know Fundación Autismo well or don't know it yet, what we do and what we don't do. So Fundación Autismo Aruba is an organization that focuses mostly on awareness creation and advocacy work. And we do sessions such as these for professionals around the island. And our goal is to inform but also educate professionals and families who have somebody or treat somebody on the autism spectrum. We do not provide direct services, so we are not a service provider like a lot of you who are present here today, but we do participate in policy and we give advice, and we sort of are a bridge between different organizations and different stakeholders to ensure that these services are in place and making sure that the rights of this group of people and their families are being protected. And then we also have members of the National Autism Committee. I do want to ask them, the ones who are present here today, to please raise their hands. So the members of the National Autism Committee, thank you so much. Yes. So since last year, we have been together for a year now, and we are a government decreed organization or committee really, of which we have a lot of members. So it is over 10 organizations, and I'm not going to list them individually. They're on the screen and you will get the slides at the end. But it is a very diverse, multidisciplinary group. So we have people from the healthcare sector, we have representatives from the primary physicians group, so from HAVA, we have specialists in our group from ASHA, we have people from government organizations, from mental health organizations, and so we have been working really hard to identify what are the gaps in our healthcare system, but also in our social and educational systems, because we do have the Department of Education as well, to sort of find out where and how and what we need to do to make sure that people who are on the spectrum but also have other developmental disorders are receiving the care that they need. And so with that, we are starting with the rounds of educating the professionals involved with today as well. So I just wanted to let you know about the committee and that it exists. So before I continue, I will be talking about intersectionality, and it might be a new term for some of you, so I will play a little video that will explain it in short.
What is intersectionality? Intersectionality refers to the way race, gender, class, sexuality, and other parts of who we are overlap with one another. People from different backgrounds experience the world differently. Intersectionality helps explain how parts of who we are come together to determine who has power in our society and who does not. People are complex, and many factors contribute to our identities and experiences. We cannot look only at one part of our humanity. We have to look at the whole picture and all the factors that impact our identity and experience in society.
All right. Hello? Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right, so I just want to ask who before today already knew something about intersectionality, and maybe not in the healthcare sense, but just the word. Just raise your hand. We don't have to be shy. Okay, so it's not many hands. Intersectionality is a, I want to say, relatively new theory. And I say relatively new because it's been around for almost as long as I have been around. But in the sense of theories, it's relatively new, and especially in the healthcare bubble. And when we think about service design, so when we think about how we provide services, be it public or healthcare services, we haven't really thought about an individual's identities and how they necessarily play a role into the services that they receive. So intersectionality is tied really to privilege, and privilege is a word that I think the last couple of years has gotten a really negative connotation to it. I am not going to use it in that sense, but it is important that we understand that when we treat people, so for those of you that are healthcare providers or provide some service, people come with privileges or disadvantages, and they have to do with how their identities intersect. And in healthcare, that might mean different things. So in healthcare, it is recognizing that patients' experiences are shaped by their realities and their overlapping identities, including race, gender, but also their socioeconomic status, so where they come from, where they grew up, their sexual orientation, the languages that they speak. And these might lead to compounded disadvantages or privileges in some cases. And this can affect the care and the quality of treatment that they provide, they're provided. So I want to ask you to put yourself in the shoe of a patient or as somebody who receives a service. How many of you can say that all of your healthcare providers speak papiamento? All of them. Okay, so not many of us, right? I would think most of us sitting in here today, because it is a group of professionals, probably speak English, probably speak a little Dutch. But that is not the reality for most people on the island. That means that some people are going to receive services, healthcare services specifically, with already a barrier, right? Not all healthcare providers provide services of translation. I have had the pleasure to work at the Health Inspectorate for 7 years now, so I have also seen from that side of the perspective what that means and what that can translate to when we talk about providing services. So I do want to talk a little bit about the Aruban context. When we talk about mental health services, we encounter cultural stigma. That means that we might have religious beliefs that don't necessarily acknowledge mental health conditions as something to be treated in the medical sense or something that would require medical intervention. It might mean that we have limited specialties because we are living in an island, and that means that we do not have all the services. That is simply a reality that we have. It means that as part of the Caribbean and Latin American cultural context, we have gender expectations, how people should and shouldn't behave. But also, we might have some socioeconomic barriers. So as already mentioned, the languages, but also if we look at the educational levels on the island, there has been different studies and the census that have come out. We have seen that there is a huge gap, right, in our community, and not everybody is on the same page. So what intersectionality does is help us recognize who is being left out and when, but also for people like myself who work in policy and members of the national committee who are shaping policy, it helps us understand that we need to take into account real life complexities when we design services. So this is an example of, it's not changing there, sorry, of what intersectionality would look like when we talk about an autistic woman, right? So we have an intersectionality of ethnicity, could be, right? They might come from different places. You have the intersectionality of gender, and then you have the intersectionality of somebody's background, cultural background or ethnicity, and then their socioeconomic status, could be poverty, but then you have gender and poverty playing a role. So all those things by themselves don't necessarily have to mean much, but once you start to put all those identities together, you will get that middle part, which is the compounded challenges that somebody might face. And I will let my colleagues talk a little bit about what those challenges look like when we talk about autistic girls and women, but this is what I would like for us to take away, that all these identities could contribute to somebody facing different challenges in how they receive service. So how does it play a role when we talk about intersectionality and disability models? Intersectionality talks about the context of identity. And then we have disability models that have been around a little bit longer, and that is how we frame systems and how we provide services. So intersectionality is showing us who is being excluded or underserved and why, and disability models are showing us how system can frame those individuals and solutions that may be needed. So ideally, what we want to find is a happy marriage between the two things so that we can talk about equity in practice. That people are being provided the services that they need when they need it in the way that they need it, right, as an individual person. So for the medical group who is here, I do want to say that nothing that I am saying is referring to any model as good or bad. They just exist and we work with them in different ways. So when we think about disabilities, the medical model has been for a very long time that we focus on the problem that we are facing. So when we are thinking about autism, we are seeing it as something that needs to be diagnosed and eventually treated, managed. The goal is diagnose, again, treat, and in some cases fix. So when we talk about a disease, we're trying to fix it or cure it. And then it has the limitation that it ignores the context. And in the case of neurodivergence, it makes it into a pathology, something to be fixed and to be managed, right? Then we have something called the social model. They're usually not really friends. But the social model focuses on the barriers that society created, right? So none of us present here today had to come in with a wheelchair, so probably none of us thought about it. None of us thought about whether or not this ballroom was accessible, probably none of us thought about where we needed to park and where our wheelchair needed to fit through, right? The social model says we need to think about it 100% of the time. And that means that it has a limitation as well, because we can't create a perfect place 100% of the time for everybody. But it's a way of seeing things. So what is the goal is to remove barriers and create access. It centers on inclusion, but again, it's one system and hope that it fits everybody. And then a lot of like really smart people, including people at the United Nations, came with something called the biopsychosocial intersectional model. And basically what it said is that we need to look at individuals, but we also need to look at systems, which is why we are here today. What we are going to do today here, hopefully, is to push all of you to, in every day when you're providing services or you're training somebody or you're working with somebody, we are thinking about whatever diagnosis that person may be, whatever your goal may be, especially if you're a medical professional, but also we're going to look at systems and how those things are contributing, or either to help that person move forward or in the sense of barriers, okay? So it's an integrated approach. It recognizes that there might be biological aspects to somebody that might be creating difficulties, but it also looks at the psychological aspect of it, at the social level, and then a systematic level. So if, policies and legislations need to be in place. This is a very important model for neurodivergent people with intersecting identities, because you can't see autism, right? You can't see ADHD. You can't see a lot of mental disorders. So we might not even know that somebody is dealing with a disability or that they are dealing with a challenge. So this model really provides a good way to frame it. And then I want to show you how these things come together into creating justice, really. So we know, I think by now, what equality is. Then we think equality is the solution, right? So we're going to provide everybody with the same ladder, for example, to get to an apple. Then we thought about equity, and we said, okay, some people might need a bigger ladder than the other one. But then when we think about a model that is really taking care of the root causes of issues, we think about justice. And that means that, yes, we will provide people with the tools that they need, but we are also going to work on fixing the root cause of said inequality. And that is called justice. And hopefully what I want us to take away from today is that we work towards equity when we can. That's usually what it is a little bit in our circle of influence, right? And the way that we provide services, but that we also push for justice. And it can be through advocacy work, but it could be also in your everyday work where you think about your protocols and the ways that services are provided, whether or not they are addressing these challenges, so that we don't continue to adapt in every single case, but we try to make adaptations that kind of take away those barriers that are causing those issues. So, I did a lot of talking already. So all of your tables have a couple of papers in the middle, which are turned around. And what I want you to do is to take them out. Each table should have about 4, so you're gonna talk to the people in your group. And we are going to discuss a case study. And I will read it, and what I want us to do is to think about the questions that are in these case studies. Okay, so this is a fictional character. It's not based on true stories in any way. So any resemblance to reality is just coincidence. Okay, so for this case study, we have Maria. She is 32 years old. Maria lives in San Nicolas. And since her teens, she struggled with anxiety and depression. Maria comes from a seriously religious family. And in her family, these things were interpreted as spiritual distress. Instead of seeking psychological help in her teens, her family turned to prayer and to the church. In school, Maria was seen as shy but bright. She often felt exhausted from social interactions, but never understood why. Maria is now an adult. She's 32, remember. She is an accountant. She excels at routine tasks, but avoids social events due to burnout. After reading about autism and anxiety in women, Maria recognized herself and sought help from her doctor, her family physician. The doctor dismissed her concerns, saying, Maria, you have an awesome job. What do you mean? You're an accountant. You're fully functional. Just avoid social situations if they make you upset, right? I mean, why do you have to do social activities? So what I want you to do in your groups is to think about how culture affects Maria's experience, what systematic or cultural changes could support earlier recognition for other Marias on the island, which disability model informed her doctor's response, if any, and what would be a better intersectional response from her primary physician if she were to come with the same question again. So I will give you about 5 minutes. Please discuss. I want to hear you discussing this. And I would like for some of you to share how you would rephrase this GP's response. Please don't fight though, just discuss. All right. So I'm not gonna go back up. I'm gonna walk around. So I will ask for volunteers, and if there are no volunteers, I will put people on the spot. I'm kidding. I'm not gonna put you too bad on the spot, but I do want to hear, if any, what your discussions and possible recommendations for the GPs, present and not present, would have been. So I want to see hands up for the volunteers first. Otherwise, I'm just gonna pick a table. No volunteers? Should I just? Okay, so then I'm gonna pick my old GP here because I know him and his table. I said if there are no volunteers, I will pick out people. So I don't know if anybody in this table wants to share what their possible recommendation. Doesn't have to be you. I'm so sorry, but it can be anybody else from your table. I want to know. I want to know.
Yes, Montari, good afternoon. We discussed regarding indeed this case study, and we came to the conclusion that it's about the religion, being set in stone. Like, okay, there's nothing wrong with this, with you. So, regarding your social, your physical, or whatever is happening right now, so the anxiety and depression. So you should look into prayer and look into how to be able to get rid of this malicious thing that's haunting you. Yeah, so that's regarding the effect of her experience. About the second question, the systematic and cultural changes. Her parents didn't recognize this as well. So, it's like after she became more aware and in her teenage years, so by the time she got to know herself better and to seek for who I am, she encountered this part. So it's, the response of her parents not knowing what to do, because if they knew better, she would go to a psychologist or to seek help. Regarding the third, the disability model, we think we were having this discussion, so I think it's part ways in some kind of way. So some of us thought it's pure the medical model, because the physician only take a look about, you are doing good at work, so the rest should be okay as well, without further asking for your social environment. How do you comply with different parts of your life? What would be a better intersectional response? I think we didn't come so far, but that's more or less. Did I forgot about something, or did I do great? Yes. All right.
Silent applause for the non-volunteer group. So now I'm going to ask again, is there a volunteer table who wants to share about what they discussed? I don't understand. Why are we shy? There are no wrong responses. It's different discussions. Do I see hands now? No? No hands? Should I just pick people this table? Yes? Do you want to say something? They're saying you have something to say. Okay. All right. So not many volunteers. That's okay too. Okay. Byron, you want to be a volunteer? You want to say something?
Of course, Carolina. Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. Before I can ask the summary of the case study about Maria, I would like to recognize the arrival of the Heza Tikulo Misha, who is present here today. So, sign of applause to Misha. All right. Now we were studying carefully about the case study about Maria's journey with Rosaline, and we thought that about the case of the doctor not recognizing on her concerns about autism. On my perspective, it turns out that nobody, the doctor cannot learn did not recognize the importance of autism, which is why it is super important for a doctor to learn more on the importance of autism, its early signs, and of course how it was developed per child, whether it's a boy or a girl. And I don't know if Rosaline can respond to the second part, right?
Also, we thought maybe he doesn't need to know about autism, but I think it's very important also to listen to the client and to not being dismissive. Of course, we nowadays have to know about autism, but even if you don't know, just be like the biopsychosocial model says, be open-minded and try to just ask questions about the social or the history. And also, it's not because she is so successful means that social, and we are social being, we are social human. We need social contact, and just take her very serious.
Thank you so much, indeed. And it's how we measure success, right? And how we measure somebody being well or unwell. So I do want to put somebody else on the spot here because we do have the Inspector General present. So I do want to ask her what her perspective on this is. She's also my boss, so that's why I feel comfortable putting her on the spot. But I do want to hear because for those of you that don't know, so I do this in partially my free time, but I work as a policy advisor at the Health Inspectorate, and we also have something called the Meldpunt, so where people can come and bring complaints. So I was telling them jokingly, but seriously, these are the type of things that somebody could come with, right, with a complaint because they feel that they were dismissed by their healthcare providers, that they came with a serious concern. Maria could, in a couple months, be in some serious depression. She could end up maybe with a psychotic break. And I think Rosaline will talk a little bit about, how serious things can go in mental health when we talk about misdiagnosis and late diagnosis. So I do want to hear, from the policy perspective, almost in a legislative perspective, about the responsibility that healthcare providers have to listen to their patients as well. So putting you on the spot.
Thank you. I did expect it, by the way. Everybody knows Carolina. I think what was already said, I think we also see this in our organization, in the complaint department. So we do recognize Maria. We've seen Maria a lot of times in our organization where we try to address and fill these gaps that we see in the healthcare sector. The doctor should not be dismissive. I totally agree. I think there's a lot of work to be done. So I think what Carolina is doing and the foundation and the national committee is very important because it starts that Maria recognizes herself and then seeks out the care that she needs. But the healthcare worker has also the duty to give a safe space for these persons to come to them. So I know Carolina knows we've seen Maria a few times. So as an organization, we try to do our best to also help that.
So much. And again, Maria is not a real person, but we're talking about different Marias, right, as a hypothetical person. And I think the beautiful word used that is providing a safe space. And I also want to say that there is no expectation, I think, and or maybe for myself, I will speak for myself then. We don't expect you as a healthcare provider or educational specialists or people in social work or even in the public sector to know everything. We don't expect that. But we do hope that if somebody comes to you with a concern, that you use your knowledge to assess said concern, right? And that we don't use always, at least, our biases or our standards of what we think is good, bad, well, or unwell, because it might differ per person. So if somebody is telling you that something is not feeling well, that we should at least give the space to discuss that. So I saw a hand here. Now people are getting excited.
Ok, lo que me da es importante como profesional da nunca laga e persona of e mayor e mucha síndico de exagerando. Antobra mi tabisa sa de experiência própria com de chiquito mi tabisa na comida nota diferença riba onde miliona e acontece sempre da aí ton lat lawyer na worry elo to bom eta kiko dos mi tabisa ko ami a ko mani wasayal na de asina trempang
Ya durante 2, 3 años luchando contra el sistema, luchando contra el doctor, te ahora me para el diagnóstico. Desde ahora, cuando si no sabe, no está seguro, siempre llama a un gente a verwijzen naar un lugar que usa mijo y nunca la ganan sin dinero más malo para você ring de bel. Você tá ter hopi coragem de ring un bel como ne emita sin de como eu não tá feito de lo que nos llama normal.
Thank you so much. My time is up, and I will look at my timekeeper, right? My time's up. But we will have more time for discussion and networking later, and I do encourage you to make use of it. And we will now go into a little bit more detailed aspects of care. I don't think I have a next slide. I can check. But I do hope that this exercise gave us the time and perspective to think about people as complex beings that we are, but also the environments that we live in, the environments that we interact with, as complex as they are. And that we have a duty, right, when we provide services, to provide the best service that we can, but also to recognize our own shortcomings, if any, and to know where our limitations are. Thank you so much for the mom who shared her experience. I think that's very important. If we don't know better, to also be able to say that, and then maybe reach out to a colleague who does or who can support you in that. So my final message, I do have a next slide. My final message is that intersectionality is not just a theory. It's a real tool that we can use to really understand people and our environments, and how we serve them. Another final message is that yes, Aruba is small, and that comes with certain limitations and challenges, but it also comes with the opportunity that we have the room and the power to lead and to reach out to our colleagues and to the people that we need in order to create change and bridge those gaps. And, together through policy, education, and advocacy, we can build systems where no one is left behind. I think that that should be the main message. So you will receive all of the slides of today as a PDF eventually, so you would also be able to look at some of the resources. You all should have gotten a little card when you came in. It has 2 QR codes. Those are resources that you can use in your practices. One of them is a space framework, and it literally has specific tips on how to set up a service area to be more inclusive. But you also received a guidebook when you scan it. You can get it, which helps you navigate conversations with parents who might be going through new diagnosis. So I think those are 2 very powerful tools that you now have to use in your fingertips. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Carolina. We continue with our presentations this afternoon. Our next speaker is Dr. Ushi Moreta, and her presentation will be Autisme Spectrum Stoornis, het medische perspectief in vogelvlucht. Autism Spectrum Disorder, an overview of the medical perspective. A psychiatrist specialized in children, adolescents, and young adults, as well as a registered family therapist with over 15 years of experience practicing in both the Netherlands and Aruba. She has developed deep expertise in diagnosing and treating a range of neuropsychiatric conditions, including ADHD and autism spectrum disorder, in both girls and boys. Dr. Ushi is known for her person-centered, flexible approach, always adapting care to fit the unique needs of each individual and their surrounding environment. She is particularly passionate about lifelong support for individuals with autism, advocating for systems that provide consistent care and understanding throughout all their stages of life. Let's give her an applause, a silent applause. Dr. Ushi, welcome.
¿Vosotros escucháis, po? Sí, ok. Well, het is een plezier para estar aquí y para doen een bird's eye view over die autisme, eigenlijk from the medical perspective. Dus hoe is die presentatie die Carolina met een tikje hesitant para mencionar el medical perspective, pero mi atra 4 años na policlínica di respaldo di Aruba y ja, just een año na Holanda y mi ta orgulloso pa visa que eigenlijk het biopsychosociaal model, manera quale wordt presentata, een forma que nos está implementada eigenlijk tour dia de ons trabajo. Dus mi ta hopi orgulloso di visa que nos está, ja. Dus things are changing, things are developing as always, and that's beautiful. Mita quiere eta tremendo para que nos ten un profesional di asina differente, asina hopi differente ramo di cuidado de salud, GGZ, nos ten educación también. Eta leuk pating asina hopi disciplina den sala y mita spera que porting tempo para intercambiar. Mita quiere pa cierto gente que lo va un tiki mucho slow y para otro lo va un tiki mucho ligero. So please bear with me. So eta ja met de purva die stem afriba in nivel die twee. My take home message. Autismo es un trastorno serio y crónico con presentación hopi variada. La presentación aquí por orden determinada por diferentes factores, incluyendo inteligencia, gender, edad y la fase específica de desarrollo de un muchacho o un joven. Un funcionamiento más alto no quiere menos que el nivel de sufrimiento tan menos. Al contrario, hopi bia un nivel de inteligencia alto, quiere menos que la persona está hopi más consciente de limitaciones y ta lucha más para adaptar na e demanda nang di su mundo. Door die variación grande, un diagnóstico cuidadoso está necesario. Diagnóstico y tratamiento siempre está con el cliente central, ajustando a su zorgvraag y a su tempo. Mi quiero comenzar un ejercicio experiencial para ya dar una impresión de autismo y con etapa experiencial aquí. Vos está arriba de mesa un post-it, un stapeltje con post-its. Anto, please hear me out, prometo vos comienza. Please party ese entre mesa, anto bra humanamente 5 cosas que vos meter de mercado ahora aquí. Dus 5 boodschappen aan. Cosas que vos meter de supermercado. Skibinang riba elista sing lagbo bisinya sa. Dus skibinang riba elista pa bom mes. Después que vos haces así, vos forma un dúo con una persona de bom mesa o una persona de otra mesa. Y bota ajustar el stoel y bota poner el stoel lomba para otra persona. Entonces bota cinta con dos stoelen lomba para lomba. Ahora boca para dejar así, bota cinta arriba el stoel. Lo cual es importante que vos no mag para, vos no mag bira y bota purba de comunicar, vos lista de compras para vos dúo. No, bueno, sí, vamos a papia, comunicador de papia, ¿ok? Pero no, sin wak otro. Y de bedoeling para nos tour hacia ese pareo. Entonces, comienza con la lista de compras, 5 compras, vamos a escribir post-it. Y ahora vamos a claro que es aquí, arrange bo stoel, que eta lomba para collega. Is dat duidelijk? Ik verkan ik een mic dus. Dus así, ¿no? Estoy. No, Não mag die bira cabeça. Ata, bo mag die papia so. Papia so. Dus, ja, ja. Bota purba di comunicar com o digo Kiko e messa compra di bolista. Ja? Ja? Bom, ma ansa. Bom, daga mi bisa say. Mi tari para ko ting tiki confusão. Bom, mag di papia si, pero bom não mag di wak outro. Dus bota cinta lomba pa outro. Ok? Dus bota papia. Sim. Laga essa, Kiko aboting griba bolista. Pisando é palavra. Sim, sim. Sim, sim. Bom, mag die bisa Kiko tariba lista. Gis bo não mag die wak outro. Ja? Swinda sa, kibo mester di mercado, e swinda talaga abo sa, kibo e mester. Intercambiar informação é. Ja? Ja? Is dat duidelijk? Zie, wat is dat? Ja. Ora bocaba, bota sinta back normal na mesa. Ja. Com isso aqui tá pahasi. Ita, com isso aqui tá, as ven, orbo. Sim, mita kere com minuto tá hopi duidelijk, tampouco minuto tá full duidelijk, den sentido com minuto bisa com bom mag die papia. Pero mita kere is het add on the experience, com hopi via het duidelijkheid. Ora falta duidelijkheid, persoon com autismo por hanya hopi confusão, por bira hopi confundir. No sentido E. El ejercicio aquí te da una impresión de cómo complicar la comunicación ta ora botin autismo. De nos vida diario, comunicación non verbal, dus como gesticulación de cara, tono de voz, contacto visual, ta una manera muy importante que nos transmitir información. Si no por ese idioma non verbal aquí, muy información te va a perder. Het desordem da sala pode representar também overprikkeling. Que a pessoa com autismo está experienciar ora com uma comunicação mais complicada. A estrutura de minha apresentação está o seguinte. Me lo começar com resumo geral de que está o transtorno de autismo. Me está enfocar Siguientemente riba early detection y hipótesis explicación alternativa para conducta que por presentar mané autismo. Mita hacia saki a base de mi experiencia con mi team na Epoli na Aruban. Milo zoom in siguientemente riba problema ng desarrollo de idioma y papia, tal en ontwikkelingsproblemen. Después mita enfocar riba condición médico que está presente frecuentemente junto con autismo. Siguientemente me lo sigue con intersección entre problemas ng apego, que está algo que está como voor hopi na Aruban. Dus hechtingstoornis, attachment disorders. Mita termina con el tratamiento de autismo na diferente edad. Mita tiki tempo hopi di bisa, dus mita baywak, quizás mita skip hier en daar un par de slides, pero no está wak con ese itabay. Mita espera con tiempo para intercambiar también experiencia. Autismo es un nombre general para diferentes tipos de características de comportación. Característica relacionada con habilidad de comunicación social, procesamiento de estímulo sensorial, filter e integración de información y una manera de pensar y flexibilidad de comportación. Un trastorno de autismo es un grupo hopi heterogéneo, es un grupo que está varia hopi. Mino que sigue sin mostrar otra banda de medalla, lo cual guarda mencionar hopi kaba. Talento nan ku hopi persona nan ku autismo team. Nan por entretener een mes hopi bom. Hopi biating hopi humor, ting un bom sentido de humor, si bota verdiep un tiki de contact. De hopi honesto, straight to the point. Mi no conoce hopi persona autismo ku por hasi un white lie easily. Dus bosa sempre kibuting nanang. Ta valora honestidad y ta hanya importante ku kosta bij rechtvaardig. Portra voor uit schema hoppibong tambe. Mita kere sakita un impresión di talento nang di autismo ting hoppi mas. Zorgstandaard die autismo holandés define autismo como una interacción compleja entre tres niveles. El nivel biológico, dus molecular y celular, psicológico, forma de pensar, emocionar y conducta, y social. Dus daarbij más over die ambiente y más breed comunidad. Autismo es un trastorno de desarrollo neurobiológico que wordt causado por factores genéticos y ambiente. Heredabilidad es que men influencia de factores genéticos man causa está entre 50 y 83%. Es que men con factores genéticos da un rol muy grande. Na bande es nos ting factores de ambiente, factores de omgeving, uta circunstancias durante embarazo. Aquí nan factores como sobrepeso, obesitas y diabetes por un rol. Particularidad inmunológica de mama y asma, sé que mama también porta factores que está asociado y describir con etiología causa de autismo. Autismo no está causado de vacuna. Uma pergunta para você. Anton está muita hammer de gestos anos. E tinha diagnose autismo. Quão grande é a chance que o seu irmão mulher chiquito também tem autismo? Repeat. En derde? Esta is een trick question. Eigenlijk erfelijkheid que men 50 para 83% de causa de autismo está genetisch. El resto está más omgeving. Pero la genetische kans que botin autismo si un rumang dibo, tin autismo está más o menos 18. Dus 1 op de 5 kans. Ja, dus er zit een massa erfelijkheid. E prevalenza di autismo assume e ultimo decada. Para dar un ejemplo, na 1966 estaba 2,1 cada 10.000 kinderen. Na 2010, para comparar, está ya bisa 100 para cada 10.000 mucho. Dus en het wordt más. Para dar un tiki perspectiva arubiano, het bom pa mencionar que Aruba Autism Project, die collega van Balkom, kinderjeugdpsychiater, a determinar que eigenlijk na 2008, 2009, ela hace onderzoek naar policlínica die hospital, die kinderjeugdpsychiatrie, anto ela llega a concluir que prevalencia eigenlijk dat komt overeen que prevalencia na momento na Estados Unidos y también na UK. Dus dat eigenlijk prevalencia de autismo está comparable, of está comparable met visa ora ku otro país na westen. Dus está pa comparar. Na 2018, então me vai back para cifra ng holandês, nós está papia de cada 59 mucha. Dus sei que mengo cada 2 para 3 clases siquiera tem mucha com autismo adin. E cifra ng de autismo está on the rising, me ta querer no pa sobra nós tem mais autismo, me ta querer que nós tem mejor reconhecimento. Y también nos incluye gente que está funcionando más alto. Manera mencionada anteriormente, un funcionamiento más alto no que menku es sufrimiento o limitación está más abajo, al contrario. Por ejemplo, suicidaliteit está, nos sabe que suicidaliteit está conforme más con personas con autismo. Y que juist si você tem uma inteligência alta, o risco é mais grande comparado com hora que você tem uma inteligência mais baixa. O síntoma principal de autismo é a limitação de wederkerigheid, dus sociaal-emotionele wederkerigheid. A limitação de comunicação sem palavra, dus comunicação não verbal. Dificultad para desarrollar, mantener y comprender relación, movimiento, idioma y comportación estereotipo. Y tienes fuerte na mesma cosa, rutina of ritual, dus inflexibel gedrag. Interesse fijar of restringir. Y sensibilidad grande of juist hobby abouw para estimulación sensorial. Se porta pijnprikkels, se porta sonido, se porta olor, se porta tocar, se porta juist hobby sensitivo of porta poco sensitivo. Ten 3 modelo de explicación neuropsicológico mundialmente aceptado over die autismo. El prometa es una zwakke centrale coherencia. El mundo te wordt experienciado de manera fraccional, sin porwak en totalidad, of tiene vista general. A theory of mind no propone bomes na estado mental de un otro, no por schat en kiko su intención anta, kiko su emoción anta. Y de tres está teoría de executieve dysfunctie, que es difícil para traer atención flexible y direccionar na diferente meta. Se porta, por ejemplo, mainta, si bota, me escucha hopi, mainta ora que mucha mesta vai banha, mesta come, e hace cierta cosa para preparar para a escola. Hopi bia, se não tá luk, sobra para o onda bota começar, com si bota guardo distrair, com bota pone bo mes back na tarefa que bota haciendo. Se tarda hopi, tem hopi incompreensão para esse. Después de korte informatie generaal over die autisme. Mikä passa pa screening in diagnóstico. Mikä dona vista riba e considerazione que guarda assim in praktijk, ora ta trata di excluir of pone diagnóstico di autismo. ASD é instrumento que me quer conhecer para hopi de busnang. Die screening orde desarrollada y standardizada na Holanda y está destinada para detectar características de autismo cerca mucha nang about de 3 anos. Está inventariza comportação riba área nang de interação social, limitação de comunicação e comportação estereotipo. E colega nang kutatra na Wetgele Kruis tatra ku lista aqui e algum bia dokter di cas para inventarizar e karakteristika di emotie. Mas verwijzing dat je respaldo di mucha entre 1 e 6 anos competição para diagnóstico. Na banda de score positivo riba ASD, trastorno nang di língua e papia ta veel voorkomende verwijzerheden. Mitas doen en riba sei problem. Na banda de autismo, trastorno nang di língua por worden causado door die limitação intelectual, ligero of taalontwikkelingsstoornis. Esa kita é particularidade nang di desarrollo de língua que pas mais com autismo. E muita tem dificuldade para compreender mensagem dentro do seu contexto. E interpretar coisas literal e não por compreender idioma figurativo ou abstracto. E por tem problema com o volume de voz, essa aqui pode ser hobby suave ou juist muito duro. E desarrollo de língua pode retardar ou pode ter uma regressão que está desarrollada até certo ponto e depois está cai back. E por ter uso de língua juist formal, mas é professor chiquito. E por ter echolali, dus juist está muito não me querer tem processo de sinha papia tur muito tem echolali, pero muito não com autismo tá queda com esse hobby largo, mas depois de dinang idade com esse tá normal. Of juist, dus não tá queda repetir palavra of juist sonido com não atende. Of juist palavra inventar com não mesa dona betekenis. Muito com autismo por ter dificuldade com o pronome personal. Dificuldade para usar mi, bo, e. Por exemplo, é também um nome para referir na sua mesa em lugar de ami. No papel at alta parte chiquito de pessoa com autismo generalmente associada com limitação intelectual mais severa. Para muitos com limitação intelectual liviano, desarrollo de papia e compreender também mais lentamente que o normal. Para poder diferenciar entre limitação intelectual e autismo, é importante para ter em consideração também que é diferencial diagnose, dus que com mais porta é causa. Para pôr coisas em perspectiva, também na Holanda limitação, dus verstandelijke beperking ligt, dat komt voor cerca 6,6% de população. Autismo, a base de cifra mais recente, está apresentando cerca 2% da população. E está bom passar também com 40 para 60% de pessoas com autismo também tem limitação intelectual. Pergunta não por ajuda a diferenciar entre autismo e limitação intelectual. Para check com a mulher está seguindo a escola, se ela chega de que era cinta, para motivo de cijfers, lagi rekensom, que está pas para sua idade, waxi por escrever palavra não simples, waxi por wakoloshi, e informar se está, que o seu hobby não está, se está, por exemplo, gosta hobby não que está pas com muito mais young. Aunque com meu colega Rocheline também lo menciona, lo papi over die aqui também, ora tá trata autismo se com muita mulher e que a diferença não está em apresentação. Lo qual tá val op hobby. Danke. problema ng médico que está presentado frecuentemente junto con autismo, también el problema ng di come. Sei por problema ng por tem problema ng pa come estrutura ng cierta estrutura ng no que come cierta estrutura de comida, ng por tem fobia de comida ng desconocido, of costumbre rígido de come. Door die factor ng aki di riesgo karakteristika ng di autismo por causa comportación de come abnormal. Ora que nos focus más riba e persona ng e joven ng e focus riba peso e forma de curva por tem un rol ding deal ku nanta sinti ku nota pas nota fit in ku nanta differente. Dus we hopen bij te waken nanta sinti control over die ku nanta come over die nan peso. Então sei portanto mané un coping para deal ku nanta sinti bom mes un parte di boclas por ejemplo. Bo portin sensitividad sensorial ku ta un rol también ku juist pota hopi gevoelig pa cierto holo nang of cierto sabor nang ku pota worden overprikkeld. Of portin pensamento nang hopi rigido over die comida. Dieta nang particular ku por bij mané full bota bij full ding essay en to bonoting ja bonotopi flexibel pa ora bota reflexionario bij essay. Door die factoren di riesgo aqui, nos tawa ku trastorno nang di come, ta e riesgo ta elevase ka persona nang ku autismo. Nos ta papia, por ejemplo, di ARVID, qual ta avoidant restrictive food intake disorder. Dus ik men ja moet je dan eigenlijk dat desarrollar of ondergewicht of dat desarrollar voedingsdeficiëntie pas op dan nota come varia. Dus dan dat come hope inzijdig. Hope team ja meer dan met die come. Anorexia in Bolivia. Nos tawak toch hope anorexia junto com autismo se kan ons hope nan. Dus si bota dokter di caso of POH GGZ, i bota wak hoben, goed bota bij referi pa SGGZ, pa diagnostica ku autismo, i bota ripara ko ta hopi flaco. Tu me tempo pa breng in kaart pa inventarisar con eta come kiko ta come pise midie. Anto hasi un lab si bota duda. Anto ja hopi bia voedingsdeficiënties dan te kom voor junto, imita kere si bota di riba un lista di espera. Pa diagnóstico eta bom passar esse de antemano. Problema nang di continência, também tá algo que tá como for hopi, no se ka adulto nang of hobi nang, pero nos tawa ko emotion nang eigenlijk is zindelijkheidsontwikkeling ta porta retrasa. Esse porta uma consequência que tem obstipação mais frequente, tem incontinência mais frequente, porta de haver também com die prikkelverwerking, com ora que botar hopi overprikkeld, bonota sinti prikkels na die curva, bonota sinti ora bo bij wc. E tem ja tem ja medo hopi hopi grande palagalos, dus pa bij af, of resistência contra holo. Dus sei toer por een rol ding zindelijkheidsontwikkeling. Ja, mi lo recomendava verwijs van een bek- en bodemfysiotherapeut, se essa aqui tá em caso. Na banda de essay, no saco a conduta de autismo tá como for hopi junto com condição sindromal. Dus par de síndrome lang ko tá apresentando um mês com conduta de autismo tá fragile X, kleine Felter, neurofibromatosis en de 22q11 deletie-syndroom. Ja, het daarbij om te kijken, moet je lopen bij in riba essay, pero mita quiere que eu take home message tá, ja, se botar para diferença grande, por exemplo, se botar para autismo e botar verstandelijke beperking e se botar waco e muitas tem certo característica nang di cara, que tá tique diferente. Mita kere ko eta bom pa verwijs referie laagdrempelig daarmee pa een kinderarts pa si een genetisch onderzoek. Problema nang di desarrollo de habilidad motórico coordinar también algo que está como for hobby junto con autismo. wat ik nang, PDD-NOS, dat eigenlijk een oude beschrijving die autisme. DCD, de caso kita coördinatie ontwikkelingsstoornis. En to is het lokaal met de papiano DJ. Wat we koto kom voor hopico autisme, ko ADHD, het kom voor hopico PDD-NOS. Nosa eigenlijk die DCD kinderen, personen lang emotioneel coördinatie ontwikkelingsproblemen. Eigenlijk 50% os die zeer ADHD of PDD-NOS of autismo, meestal bisa. Nós está papiando concretamente de problemas problema de marafeiter, corta cusquer, skirbi of corebais. Isso é porta difícil. Isso aqui também é algo que por ordem tratado de fisioterapeuta. Então, se botar esse puntra, então se é necessário para que maior não ensina tá open para esse referir também para fisioterapeuta. That being said, ik zoom in riba het contexto di Aruba. Door die toch resulta onderzoek die signora Clemencia Eugene, hoe ha su promotie, a defender su promotieonderzoek 30 di mei passa. Antobra mita bypassa riba dia cortico, passou e tempo da cortico. Pero es conclusión ta ela onderzoek naar Aruba entre escolar nang, antobra ela ben concluí hoe eigenlijk naar Aruba 78,4% die escolar nang ko ela onderzoek maakt mij een forma siquiera die mishandeling, dus een forma die abuso. Entonces se porta más emocional, se porta físico, se porta sexual. Se sexual trata menos, pero esto como for hobby. Ese es el contexto que nos atrae con él. Niet quiere que hobby de boso, se trabajando de onderwijs en veld médico of GGZ, lo reconoce situación tenso que timianos mucha y hobby nang talanta ding. Por tin negligencia, problema nang die relación ni mayor, problema nang die adicción of psiquiatría, seca mayor, violencia of abuso sexual na casa. Dank je zo dat seca turgende per het kom voor hobby. Met referie naar cifra nang die veiligheidshuis, is aquí da un infographic bio, pero eta ripara nos ook un grupo grande kota ta parse kota vira más de risiko jeugd. E nós temos ook problema nang die apego e problema nang die stress na casa, também door die factor nang psychosocial, maar pobreza. Of tra hobby ita tiki na casa, ta hunga un rol. Awa kon nos ta midi essay ora nos ta con nos ta neme sei mede nos diagnostiek paso nos saco problema nang di apego por parte autismo. Ora com mucha não tem nada de hanya dentro da omgeving, ora ta sinti moeder-kind relatie te out of sync, tim jij mucho por give up, então por ta mais passivo e não ta busca contacto mais. Mita quiere que é importante para botar atenção para esse. Anto pabo papia bom, anto pabo duna atenção na parte de embaraço, que é para mim ainda de chiquito. E durante o embaraço pabo tem atenção para problema nang mental, de mama, de tata também, sei também tá muito importante. E que particularidade nang tem que stress tata tem. E para essa toda informação para nem também para boar bom diagnóstico. Para um tipo de tempo minuto vai em revesa aqui muito deep, pero é bom para realizar isso aqui. E tem hope informação over die combo por diferenciar isso aqui não. Tu slides não tá guardo gemeld. Autismo por conjuntamente com o problema de apego, e me tá querendo que o colega não conta tramas que volwassen não operação paralel para transtorno não de personalidade. De minha opinião, seguro é possível. Ora que eu estou tratando uma pessoa com autismo, é importante para reflexionar junto com ele sobre sua infância e para como hope ela sente inseguro, quanto inseguridade ela tem, quanto trauma ela tem. Ora que persona com autismo maakt mee hope onveiligheid durante sua infância e também por desarrollar problema de emoção que também mais leu com o autismo e também por exemplo de medo de ser rechazado. E tem tratamento é importante para diferenciar entre essa aqui e para também para dar essa atenção. Então, dar parte de problema de apego e trauma e trauma e atenção devido para dar bom behandeling. Mita hazi overstap para terapia de autismo. Mas mencionei anteriormente, autismo tem diferentes formas de manifestar. Diagnóstico profundo é necessário para chegar a plano de tratamento personal. Diagnóstico profundo não quer sempre que nós fazemos onderzoek extensivo, já que isso aqui pode causar retraso. É importante para inventarizar a vulnerabilidade específica de pessoa que está causando sofrimento ou a causa que está disfuncional. É importante para zoom in, riba que a pessoa é mais importante para trazer para cambiar ou para trazer para mencionar. Hopi biar nós pensa, ok, nós quer se tem autismo, não, aqui é importante para a mama que pode modelante para nós sucar. Então, já é importante algo diferente de lo qual, por exemplo, a mim é importante. Então, eu riba dialogar sobre isso. A terapia de autismo, ja, met de psycho-educatie is een parte hobby grande de terapia de autismo. Es porta más informativo, maneira com flyers, com websites, com ja toch informatie bijeenkomsten, kost na sina. Es porta más maneira guia, en de guia meeste bij sempre over die acceptatie. Como bota integrar lo qual bosa over die bomes, ding bo zelfbeeld, como bota assim sei. Como botar perspectiva de vida novo, plan novo para a carreira, para a escola, para tudo caminho. Então, botar assim, se não só para botar assim, se é omgeving que botar crescer ding. Me quer mencionar paspoort também, autisme paspoort, me quer minota bij erop in hoor aqui, pero autisme paspoort, botin autismepaspoort.nl. Dat site tremendo, caminda por trama echt uitgebreide ja, toch ordening die ondersteuning personen met ster. Kiko dat su vulnerabilidad nang kiko emester. Denk trabalho na school para funcionar. Je moet ook zeggen ja, het ben compatriot, en to is het echt een forma hobby. Bom de papia com o cliente, então para ja lá o cliente também papia com sua omgeving para informar de Kiko está aí fastidioso e Kiko está bem bom. Então, mais tip. Hobby cortico sobre me te quero que está bom se para mencionar ja nós tem basta possibilidades para trata autismo ora que muito não tô opinião tem parte de acceptatie que começa agora assim pero que ora que tem diagnóstico nós tem diferente forma diferente método que para estimular desenvolvimento se que muito não vooral entre 0 e 10 anos dus tem basta programa over die zaken então me te querer kennen Centrum Kinder- en Jeugdpsychiatrie me por doen essa tip het is echt een lugar que brinda informação over the evidence-based treatments. Me por aí a seguinte slide. En outra atrás. Ja, mita quiere decir que conta pa mucho nang más grande también, dus adolescenten nang mucho nang die basisschool, groep ja klas 5 en 6. Ouder, nos ting diferente oudertrainingen, en nos ting vaardigheidstraining. Nos ting een programma nang gedragstherapeutisch, kuta por invocar, por ejemplo, riba stemming, maar stemming of juist psychoseksuele ontwikkeling, qualto un tema op importante también pa doen attention a je, un tema kuta waarde lubida, die E nos ting diferente vaardigheidstraining. Meneer, por ejemplo, sociale vaardigheidstraining, theory of mind training. Dus training die empathie, meneer combo por comprender cognitivo. Kiko otra persona está pasando a ding of kiko está pensa. Ja. Diferente apps e houdmodules kuta echt ja te pas bong pa generación die adolescenten. Por ejemplo, Michael menciona el Discover app, que está investigado actualmente en Holanda. Es un module con VR y cognitive gedragstherapie. Dus con VR wordt bij enfrentar situationen social y como therapeut wordt estar stil na manier que te pasa de una situación fingir con VR. Pa adulto nang ik mencionar el siguiente intervención specifiek. Nos ting een mindfulness programma of ting een mindfulness programma specifiek para us. Ting sowieso cognitieve gedragstherapie, partnerrelatietherapie, train skills na die trabajo, EMDR, schematherapie, ACT, dialectische gedragstherapie. Dus eigenlijk door therapie nang ja más common que nos usa eigenlijk cultura gente por orde aplicar pero me se tiene cuenta si cu autismo y mita mostrar remedio un rato sina mita tabay erop in pero lo cual mita quiere importante para mencionar que eigenlijk remedio in lugar ora con otra intervención nang psicosocial no está suficiente entonces ja dus gis remedio so eigenlijk da un tiki poco meneer tratamiento de autismo. Mita concluir con un par de tips concretos over die combo por adaptable comunicación, combo por organizar bo gesprek, bo meeting con una persona con autismo, teniendo en cuenta con vulnerabilidad. ¿No? Si es posible, purba de organizar un tijdstip que está más tranquilo. Be on time. Dus, y purba de usar un kamer fijo, si es posible un stoel fijo. Tiene información breve y duidelijk. Ordena y visualiza. Dus vooral ora stress te halto, toma un whiteboard, toma un papel, si lo cual botín, comienza a escribir. Eso te ayuda a ordenar el caos que ya una persona porta experienciando de su cabeza. Tiene cuenta que una persona por wat op algo hopi concreet, hopi letterlijk. Y tiene problema nang pa wak kost en perspectiva. Por ejemplo, si boto wak meneer dokter, si me comienza un medicamento, que cultuur minister explica eigenlijk legalmente over die remedie, die bijwerkingen nang y kuta kom voor bambisa un cada 1000 gente. Dus tiene cuenta que ese den kom bota ga om ko información, etc. Y toma extra tiempo ahora que ya teniendo en cuenta que overprikkeling. Es no que men que bo consulta meester loop uit, tiene bo mes na tiempo, pero timbia bo meester plan 2 of 3 afspraak per mes que bo por bij over door die algo. Illimita, zet maar bij dokter nang uso die remedie zo nodig. Pas op dat timbia zo nodig, dus si meester, dan hoop je onduidelijk, maar ik kies er meester. Sia consciente di que ese porta. Ja, se porta difícil. That's it. It's yeah, thank you. Mita quiere que no tenga tiempo para preguntar nang
All right. Menos así ting pregunta. ¿Sí? ¿No? Zei tu no van si? No? Okay, no. Okay. All right. No siguiente speaker, no siguiente orador para hoy tarde, our next speaker, I would like to introduce Rocheline de Cuba. She will be talking about I don't look autistic. Ik zie er niet autistisch uit. A forensic healthcare psychologist and infant mental health specialist with over 16 years of experience in the social field, including 9 years in child and youth psychiatry at Respaldo, Aruba. Her work focuses on children and youth with a diverse range of neurodivergent profiles, including ADHD, giftedness, and especially autism spectrum disorder, her area of specialization. Rocheline is deeply committed to early detection of autism in both girls and boys, driven by the high suicide rates within this population. She advocates for increased awareness around the gender bias in autism diagnosis, noting that for too long, autism has been seen through a male-centered lens, leading to girls being misdiagnosed or overlooked entirely. Ladies and gentlemen, Rocheline.
Buon tardi, la commissaria. Mi nome é Rocheline, mas não vou saber se acaba. Minha apresentação também over die muito mulher que nos não te reconhecer fácil, não? Então, a maioria muito mulher que te drenta poli, ora que não drenta que ja toch bij verwijzing nunca não te drenta que é vraag tem autismo. E bonota wa que mesora tampouco que te hasi e grupo aqui tiki mais complicado eigenlijk para diagnosticar. Se você me quer elaborar awe Pakiko, pasomra nos um estereotipo beeld kaba de com é muito mulher que lo me seta pas de certo critério para nos bisa, ok, e ora me mag stel vast e autisme spectrum. Lo que nos está wak duidelijk, juist door que nos está pensa que é muito mulher aqui tá hopi shy, nanta social onhandig, bueno te aspect que juist é muito mulher shy nan aqui porta juist declamando poesia na casa cultura, of porta modelo, of incluso por vir huisarts, of também fazendo psicologia, por exemplo, na Holanda agora aqui, met ex-cliente que está fazendo isso, e também por estar eigenlijk componendo música, não? Dus nós não tá pensa, pero comportar a gente aqui tá sendo shy e toch é para diante de público grande, pero nós não sabe que traz isso para porrar se isso, e tá passa script entre dia dentro sua cabeça para poder chegar na dona apresentação e tá super bom riba certo área. Ora nós estamos discutindo polimes, também nós estamos com o woord para outro, para so van, hey, het has ook so contact basta, ok, porque oogcontact, você sabe quanto ela treina casa com sua mama, para porrar se oogcontact. Agora aqui nós estamos pensando, não, para oogcontact het has basta, ok, dus não, agora bota cambia richting, pensa, não, minuto quer que eu sei, para portar gewoon sociale angst eigenlijk, não? Mijn presentatie uit daarbij die konta sina moeilijk. Het bent moet je mogen kunnen ze behandelen tussen 2023 en 2025 aan mijn andere supervisie die USHI, dus een minuut traha miso, je bent contente com minuut traha miso, riba e caso sina complicado também. Que conosco possível voor die aanmeldingsreden, na ontwikkelingsanamnese, pero também aan talento e de com é nota fácil para fazer, zeker na Aruba binnen de complexiteit die Aruba seu contexto, não? E última conclusão e me espera nos por a chance para por estar me pergunta, me gusta para gente puntra, pues nós está assim, nós assim mais de outro, não? Daarnaast também, o que botou WAC, que tem certo bepaalde doelgroepen mes en het fácil para reconhecer patronen, pues estereotipo que nós tem riba certo groepen, não? Helaas, ainda onderzoeken aan terecht hopen riba mannen eigenlijk met autisme en weinig
bij vrouwen met autisme. Personen te afgelopen 7 jaren pas naar Hollanda. Tien toch van onderzoekers naar de echt recht mas riba e grupo aqui. Dus notabisa que ainda tem conhecimento para não genoeg. Por exemplo, riba e camoufleren, tem onderzoek te going on. E me tá benieuwd para aqui que tá sali voor die resultado não é, no? Também que nós pensa que tá mas tanto sendo que gente, dos gente blanco e nós lubida riba e grupo também die donkere kindjes, no? En nós saco donkere kindjes é maior não te rapportar que tá tara 6 anos mais comparar com que tá wete kleuren kindjes, pakiko. Pas sombra tim viaja, ora que nós tá bij den gezichtsuitdrukking, donkere kindjes no turora ora não te bira schijven lege por lees af voor die non-verbal, no? Dus zij dan met een groep kom je para kuta lubida tim viaja. Andere expressie bij meisjes dan bij jongens. E ainda, met een bouw psychologo na mes in een school nang kom je wak, nós te pensa sempre que o autismo toch tem a ver com emesterrase e hulahli, dus het repetilo que me te papia. Também nan oogcontact, fladderen, op tenen lopen, en toen moet je maar dan komen te papia de e não tem nenhum de sintomas aqui. Dus ora het por ponebo toch ding outro richting ku, você pensa não, me não te quer que tá autismo. Para me para quieto rato que não, me que wak toch verschillen entre mucho homem e mucho mulher. Lo que bota wak ku mucho mulher não tá suele de tem menos muito ku cambio não, mucho homem tá tiki mais difícil, dus se borrasse cambio não porra temper tantrum. Mucho mulher não tá mais teruggetrokken, mucho homem não tá mais toch toch borrasse contacto riba vreemde manier. E também mucho não mulher tá letterlijk não tá imita hopi mas lihe ku mucho homem, mas mucho homem juist tem hora nota muito toch mais funcioneel e não tá menos gerecht riba relatie, no? Foi onderzoek te mostra também que se nós coi dois grupos, por exemplo, de baby, grupo de baby que não tem autismo e grupo de baby que tem autismo, botou ook duidelijk que não tá focus mais riba things, que não tá focus riba relatie. Zeker mucho mulher não necessariamente te blijkt uit onderzoek riba essay. Daarnaast também fascinaties para gewone meisjesdingen, dus wanneer demasiado intensivering kuta met gusta bestia por exemplo, para mim bij drumiku, mi sete pato nang de mi kamer of mi bij maneira cuida nang e sendo como te bisa nome que bij school ora. Man porta op angstig, valangst, lichamelijke klachten. Jongens dan mas externaliseren, no? Dus bij jongens dan met de val op, zo kenta is zo'n que te remarcar hopi viaja e te verwijs door aan ons huisartsen, per tambe te docenten dan que tambe te reparar gedrag in klas, no? E porta que muito mooi dan plotseling stemmenswisseling tambe que ta hopi blij e porta hopi rabiat in viaja. E moet je hammer dan mas explosief e woede aanvallen. Zij porta verschil die kon nos te wak muito mulher menos lihe com muito homem. Sowieso meisjes en muito mulher com que papia die oude te eigenlijk mijn intelligentie op biata entre 100 en 125 no communuta hayan e outro grupo aqui pero e grupo comita wak ultimamente cu mita mas specializar mas teribe area aqui. Nanto eigenlijk grupo binnen een subculture pasombra di kong pasonanta camufla in nanta masker nang eigenlijk naar klachten. En dat compenseert door kunanting hoge intelligentie. En também dat kopiëren basta. Dat kan meneer bestuderen of meneer super interessant in boeken psychologico, in sociale vaardigheden, kunnen po imitar também essa que para por dilmi houding in sociale context. No? Meer gericht op de relatie met anderen. Também botou toch wel nos estimular nos muito morrer não mais social comparar com muito homem tem viaja, não? Então essa é a assim que nota não tinha mais lihe e sociale vaardigheden comparar com muito homem. Daarnaast botou também que não tá perfecte studenten, alleen maar 9 en 10 door na intelligentie of 8 7s. Na school não tá de ideale student, não tá se huiswerk, não tá pas na mes aan. Dus não escuta, e docente hopi mais lihe e kutahasi ku e docente ta pensa que é ideale kindje, dus ja, ta ga je 9 ku 10, 7 ku 8, dus minuut in klacht die gedrag eigenlijk, no? in minuto ita kom mee. E sei te hasi kutimbiaha na school, nanta e ideale meisje, per na kas, ora kuna jega, na miste dat toch, na miste hersteltijd, en toen nang na kasi por wakti ora, no gedragsproblemen automatisch, per na miste hopi, maar na miste droom yung tiki mas, na nota sali fin een kamer, pasonan por miste verwerkt, lo que kuna passa durante dia. Eigenlijk, timbiaha, den diagnostiek mes, dan moeilijk, pa kiko ta aangeleerd, kiko ta echt autisme, no? Besombra, hobi biaha nantalanta kuna mama kuto hene muhe, anto nata kopier lo que ku en mama ta sienang, anto lo que mito wak den praktijk tambe, hobi biaha mama nang automatisch ta pas aan de meisjes nang aki, ita sienang manera, ja, toch kombo meser doet mee den sociale context, no? Dus we zijn 10 ora pa bohalen uit diagnostiek en nota fácil. No impossível, no? Vluchtig oogcontact timbiaha tambe nan por hasi, pero nan contacto di boa ta aangeleerd, no? Timbiaha bota pensa ku juist door ku nanta teruggetrokken of verlegen, ku ta hoort bij meisjes, no sta een cultuur een tiki verlegen, en toen we pensa, maar zij ta gewoon verlegenheid, no? En je bota pensa mesora bij meisjes que porta autisme, siendo jongens bota pensa mas lihe, ku ting mani algo vreemd. Nos meetinstrumenten nang ko amita usa na poli, tampoco mi abay para bestuderen nang nos te bisa manera nanta menos sensitivo pa saca eigenlijk meisjes met autisme. Vooral si mi te papi di mi ados, ados kui ADR, nanta score un tiki massa bouw, net kantje bord sai shete, kuto bira manu een puzzelstukje pa mi 10 ora. Daarnaast wordt de waak ons vragenlijst gericht vaak op klassieke autistische kenmerken en weinig eigenlijk op ons spectrum. Também a gente usa SRS 2 vragenlijst, maar bij bestuderen vragenlijst bij presentatie aqui, en dan wij para conta het een vragenlijst is 5 vragen, de 5 só tota é vraag gericht pa mucho muhena. Dus essa aí me pensa que hasta de ensai nos lotin que vai poner mais atenção, no? Claro, nos turta hasi aqui vragenlijst vanuit Holanda, pero met lo que a meta hasi si, meta vertalen sempre na papiamento e meta hasi junto que é maior na papiamento também, para sobre aceras nota vragenlijst de fácil é se botin maneira maior na kunota compreender holandês of certo botingo echt doen voorbeelden também para por compreender a vraag certo pergunta não e a obsessies não como bem com vídeo masoro para boa ku eta nós tá juist leuk e obsessies não que muito muito por ti não hopi interessante hopi fascinerend onde nanta ku por exemplo nanta sina interessante em tempo de Frozen met dat sat eens en al die Frozen para muito mais que dat sina obsessie riba sei die bestia nan também K-pop en muziek en art. Dus nós tá interessante, não tô bonito pensa que door que muito menos que assina interessado em área aqui, bolo pensa que sabe porta obsessie que tá hoort ding autisme, não? Even kijken met erbij een film. Sabe tá ina van Erkeler honest e mesta geeft toe. Het auto team de quase 30 anos trabajando den vak, het een professor. Hij les na Universiteit Leiden, botawa kong ete bisa eigenlijk ku etambe a overlook e science nang no e ciência e momento e tambe a overlook certo konan ku hopi meisjes nang ja no a haye e diagnose na edad jong pero juist na laat eti nunca a haye cultuur consequência no se espera volume
eigenlijk wel autisme in.
Ja, ik denk het wel. Ik denk het wel, natuurlijk. Dat zal ik je niet, hè? Ik denk het wel. Het is natuurlijk een breed concept en dat geeft ook wel de term spectrum aan. Dat vind ik wel heel goed dat ze gezegd hebben, we pakken alles bij elkaar en dan hebben we het over een spectrum. Dus ik denk zeker dat het bestaat. Er is een duidelijke overloop. Hoe vaak lezen wij niet, nou ja, hij is een beetje autistisch, of ik herken wel autistische trekken, ja, de appel valt niet ver van de boom, of zo, weet je, dit soort dingen zeg je natuurlijk ook heel vaak. Dus ik denk dat er een soort overgangsgebied is. Die PDD-NOS is wel interessant wat je zegt, want daar zit natuurlijk het ruis in. Wat de DSM-5 nu heeft, is een nieuwe categorie, Social Communication Disorder. En Dat is lastig, want ik denk namelijk dat daar alle vrouwen met autisme in komen.
Dat moet je even uitleggen.
Ja, want het is, nou, wij missen heel veel vrouwen. En ik heb net met de CC ook een hele ingewikkelde casus gehad van iemand 20. Die is vanaf de zevende jaar al een vrouw in de hulpverlening. Er is gewoon van zo'n dossier is er maar 1 keer iemand die heeft gezegd, misschien moeten we eens aan ASS denken. Terwijl voor mij is het geen twijfel mogelijk. Ja, en we hebben er met echt heel veel mensen naar gekeken. Nou, wat zien wij met die vrouwen? En daar heb ik me ook absoluut schuldig gemaakt. Als ik ouders heb en daardoor neem ik de anamnese mee af. En dan vraag ik naar bekende autistische kenmerken. Onder andere is uw dochter heel erg geobsedeerd of gefascineerd door bepaalde dingen. Zegt die moeder of die vader. Geef eens wat voorbeelden. Wat doen we dan? Schema's, automerken, heelal. Allemaal mannendingen. Allemaal mannendingen. Ja? Nou, wat we nu uit onderzoek weten, wat hebben die meisjes? Soapseries. Paarden, dieren. Nou, welk 14-jarig meisje hangt niet de hele dag op de manege rond? Waar zit dan het verschil? Ja? En dat is natuurlijk toch wel heel interessant dat we daar niet goed naar gekeken hebben. Dus nu zijn we met veel landen met onderzoek bezig om te kijken waar moeten we nu heel erg op gaan aan letten. Nou, deze vrouw van de CCE die ik kreeg, die kent alle soapseries uit haar hoofd. Ik vroeg dus aan de ouders daar nu toch alert op van, goh, hoe is ze met dieren? Enig, zei die vader, echt waar. Ze is zo goed met dieren, zo leuk. Ik zeg, kunt u voorbeelden geven? Ik dacht, nou moet ik er niet intuimen. Dan moet je echt even het fotoboek zien. Het fotoboek werd gehaald. Dit meisje was met 7, viste ze met een net kleine eendjes uit de sloot, deed ze thuis in de badkuip. Ja, helaas kon ze de moeder niet pakken. Enig, hè, zoals ze met dieren is. Ja, enig. Ja. Nou, pas op, hè. En dan hadden ze een foto van de douche die gevuld was met egels. Nou, dus echt buiten de grens om. Ja. Maar ik heb dat nooit doorgevraagd.
Herkenbaar de praktijk daarmee. Hoe toen we aan te jagen zeggen nos, wat dossier of nos digitale dossier. Capaz diferente, psicólogo, diferente instancia, no? Então, kubotawa, eu não pensa riba autismo, para sombra, o bibianos te pensa que porta borderline, no? Então, esse aí me também uma sora riba slide também, me no, eigenlijk para me bisa eerlijk, presentaties dan kom ik te doen over dit thema, ik het durami ore e meia para 2 horas para me poder echt dingen diepgang, no? Je kunt ons toch waak entre mucho hammer dan thema's dan te veel outro. Geschiedenis, politiek, auto, trein, vliegtuig, dataplattegrond. E turdos te gusta hobby computers e gamen. So timbia nos timbia ting hobby te gusta game, per e quantità di con hobby nan te game, no? Nos timbia nan te lubida hasta come of na notatie huiswerk. Dado momento que mama está começando a maneira essa aqui tanto que estranho, of não te queda hopi ding na câmara, na nota sala mas e hopi ciência, não? Muito morrer não tá mais costang, mas nem mais, mais cozy, mais leuk, natuurtuinieren, psychologie en het lichaam, dieren, kunst, creativiteit. Dado momento met auto sa tour in zijn out nan die een serie die pandia Tokyo Revengers, Naruto, so nanting algo hopi ku Japão. E também com manga, não? Não sei no que mense que tu pessoa me te gusta manga of Japão me te autist, pero é kenmerk que porta, betingo pensa riba ng obsessies, não? E cada mucho me te haya mas me conhecer o grupo aqui, cada viaja me te queda a mês de certo obsessies que não tenho, tu me haya que riba na nota pone nang, e pensei me te bisa que nós tenho certo investigação tenho vem plaza ainda riba e área aqui também. Misverstand que nós temos ainda. Você quer que os meisjes com autismo tenham empatia? Ok. Então, se pensar que não tem empatia, a recente investigação mostra que não juist voelt demais, não vibreer mee bij alle stemming, in een omgeving, não pak op demasiado kiko te going on. Dan staat precies door die Canadië heen de king te being of no. Dus dan te pick up too much eigenlijk. We zijn met de hasin aan kansat in biaha, ora nang miste je kasko na miste hersteltijd de un sociale contact. Dan te gusta te de een social gathering, pero te koste nang hopi energia, no? Door kunnen te voel die mas. E unico kos kunnen sa un tiki si, kom je te voel duidelijk ainda ko wetenschap eigenlijk die kom.
ku e cognitieve empatie porta tiki complica, pa sombra na no sa timbiaha compa reacciona, então saki e afgestemd in situatie. Então saki ta algo ku tinku by wak di kong, no? Dus pesai e theory of mind também ainda ta undi e tema nang of e teorie nang mas usa ribe área aqui. Pero kun nanti empatia, sim. Kun nanti cognitiva empatia, sai ta algo outro. Of mita querer lo que mita waxi ku ta tarda na tiki mais para compreender, se você explica tiki, para que outro tá vul assim. Então, pensei mita gusta usa mi tom test, como também ribe gema soro, so que não boto wak duidelijk também ribe certo secondary order theory of mind e nana na nota tur ora, mita bisa não falta costa um passinha ribe sei. Então, no saco, o jonger nos diagnostica é muito bem aqui, mas ligena possinha certo vaardigheden também hasta ribe área aqui. Jonge meisjes, minosa hayan ang hobby, mi kisa ding mi carriera na 9 anos na respaldo ta pa 2 biahama echt wak e tipo de meisjes na kipa kiko nanta bing hobby biaha den puberteit. Kiko nos ta wak ku klachten te neem toe vooral ding nieuwe situaties, levensverandering, maar também het wegvallen of ontbreken van ondersteuning. E hersteltijd comesteer também depois de social gathering. E se que nós, helaas, nos nota tra preventivo, tinko melte ora que tem leidersdruk. Dus we zitten lopen bij certo area, dus parte social e parte emocional. E não boto wako mese tem leidersdruk. Portabo tem muito que tem autism spectrum, pre mama ta pas ansina bom na je, que não tem muito leidersdruk ainda, não? Tem hora que vai escola com 4, 5 anos, quando a comissária para que hey, esta hanya portani esta bayando bom na escola, cognitivo, pero timbiaha esta yora hopi ora ku emese vai escola. E é moeilijk para separar de sua mama. Dus met de caso de 4, 5 anos, tá algo assim, que tá tem separatie angst, ela drenta com separatie problematiek, pero com um momento não pensa me sobre riba autismo. Por isso que mas se bem um jaar me chega na diagnose, você me quer excluir por outro fator não para mim me chega riba sei. Dus mas se ouderkindrelatie para mim, mas floor play e depois na última hora me tá agora com nós. E tem algo que tá parecendo de richting aí, me nós televas me sora, pero ma bisa nós também hacia como hipótese e behandel, depois que se bota wak que queda pega ainda. 12 jaar, tá mas tanto lo que ku mita wak nang chega se nós, 18 anos também tá passombra, não tem ku não tá acaba a escola, não? Então não tem ku vai Holanda hopi biada, sei também tô preocupada, of sim viaja hasta misa wak emocional ku tá vai universiteit, tim viaja que não também tá chega assim. 24 anos e idade de 30, porta hora não vira mama, hopi cambio e idade de pensioen também. Jonge meisjes dan klachten, zie me bijback restrictief. Ding kom het beste ding ontwikkelingsanamnese, lukt boto wako 18 maanden en dat is heel gevoelig voor prikkels. Dus dan wordt een huilbaby, drumi malo, come malo, dus dan wordt een picky eater. E algun din nan ta passiv, nan ta bom mucha, no? Nós tem cultura que nós te pensa, ai, eta hopi tudo, eta bom mucha. Pero vão saco eta baby com reagir mesmo. Se nós pensa, ai, eta hopi quieto. Então, dessa cena me este watch out que é porta sinal de esse, no? Daarnaast também nós ta waku nan tin sociale egulali, nós não po imita hopi ligelo que nan ta wak in een communicatieve vaardigheden também na por sim, essa aqui que po camuflare mais lighet também. E nós estamos aqui de manhã para encontrar sim, pero combine muita mulher aqui porta donando poesia na casa cultura e de bom cantor toch nanta bij bouw die banki heel angstig. Pas sombra se camina mag dit zo autistisch mogelijk en to eigenlijk de omgeving nou mag die nanta pretend, no? E tem viaja na casa na porta basta opstaan. Bono quer sa aqui que mama nanta contar me tinha hora aqui que não por hasi na casa. Hopi viaja en te interessado in kost na hopi leuk, maneira feeën, prinses, dieren, tekenen, knutselen, kost na ko bote ha hopi interessante, hopi leuk. I vaak gericht op één onderwerp en sociaal wenselijk. Het dan hopi intenso si dingen area na aki, dus henter die je wak frozen,
Henter dia wak find ni mo na wak find ni mo mais 7 8 biyaha, te mama de bisa ma no supo bai cambiele. Tambe ku bota wak ku nanta toch ja nan kier e sociale contact. Lo que sempre nanta bisa ku nanta sinti di young kaba ku nanta wata different, no? En toen kiko te passa, dan keer sempre hoor erbij. Dus dan echt hasina best hoor bij de groep. En toen kiko wat awak in ja, in puberteit meisjes zijn niet zo vriendelijk, no? Dan porta mean girls, no? En toen zei ik por hurt nang hopi mas ku porta moet je moe kunoting autisme. Daarnaast nos te wak nang spel, hopi biaha met te observeren een spel, een fantasiespel, kuna imita die otro gente, zei ik men tim biaha nan noti fantasia, pero si nanta imite lo que kunanta wak ding in daily life, no? Daarnaast dan we boto waku nanta copia hopilihe lo que kunanta wak riba iPad. Por ejemplo, tata un tempo serie di 13 Reasons Why. Ora que me chama de 30 segundos que tata hopi depressief. Letterlijk het tata sinti maneta tata ja personage di 30 Reasons Why, no? Então, letterlijk por bisa palavra nan tour que moet je tata papia ding serie eitame. Dus inmiddels met auto sai serie foi minha cabeça op een gegeven moment de tanto que tata papia de serie eitame. E tim viaja nós pensando não tem fantasia, pero juist dan por te veel fantasie também, que tim viaja tá moeilijk para o que te fantasia e realidade. Samenspelen por parsikunante samenspelen, per tim viaja tá hunga ernaast. E também por ta kom dominant panang por hunga, paso nang kier ja toch pas bij, no? Oké, met daarbij de última parte, 20 meisjes kunnen ze de mijn caseload komen tot dat ding, maar je analyse die na aanmeldingsreden, lo que nos está wak ku na nota drenta solamente ku quejo, nanta bin ku complexiteit di quejo. Si nos wak suicidaliteit está unina, per tambe eetstoornissen. Nanta drenta tambe ku sociale angsten, in een poort een risico door kunang nota comprender tu via social cues, die worden verkracht door eigen vriendjes. Hij me eigen maakt mee tambe de un caso ku tot dat ding. Sociale angst, paniekaanvallen. Tim via por drenta kun psychose, dus door kunang tanto na mistera ja koop, no? Koop ding in sociale omgeving. Dus ita met dat in cambio na, no? Dus net ora kuna mistera bij een stage, nu hinnen nog voorbereid nang, kutambe por doen nang, mas depressieve klachten, moet je dan kun nota bij school, met dat in varios casos un tempo, onder kun mistera ajuda, kun reintegrar bij school back. Dat in een meisje ku echt nunca logra bij school, que mistera bij, dus toch online school eigenlijk. Ik conversie kun aan te haaien, dus dan voor haaien lichamelijke spasmen. Tambe botowak duidelijk concentratieproblemen, zijn ons po bruhe ku ADHD. Tambe hopi gepest, zij tambe hopi biapso nos nota comprenderen. E tambe botowak duidelijk e porta gender dysphoria tambe, dus moet je me haya varios, me tragen varios casos, moet je muhe ku kierta moet je homber. E onderliggend tawata e autisme. E mutisme, dus no popapia, nanta klap dicht in sociale contacten, sendo nanta moet je moe naar die VWO 10 horen, no? Imaginavo op examen, zei dat het moeilijk op je moet je moe aki. Dus, sinus wak bong, e comorbiditeit, dus jong nota bing, eigenlijk, zeker nos solamente één klacht. E tambe automutilatie, suicide pogingen, e kieskeurige eter, als gevolg por bira, kuna nota sinti, ja toch, hongergevoel, por leidt toch naar een anorexia, no? Si mi wake edad, sa ki toch ora mi tauta analizando mi mes un caso nang ding ja literatuur te bisa ku helaas moet je mohenan die grupo aki ta haya nang diagnose promebia ku just 4 anya se kanos mi to wak ding anki ta 20 caso no bueno por bisa que ta representatief pero si boto waku ja es un mas young se kanos tauta 12 jaar. Es un más viejo tota 18 y el meeste nanta hanye ku 5 anos. Kiko met hanye ku botowak tambe ora ku mi hasi ontwikkelingsanalyse met de vraag goed door. Ku duidelijke voorbeelden i bom se tin kennis die autistische beeld. So no te turora bota bij 10 puntra pa puntra, pero bota bij echt gericht O que me tá reparar, tem certo mama que tem aceitar esse problema, que sacava tem algo, que não contestava honestamente também e pergunta que eu estou apontando não. Então, não está sina, para se comer tu muito está sina, toch? Então, vou me echt pushen e vraag door, para chegar echt concrete voorbeelden também. Como baby não tá, tudo é bem muito não como mostra agora, tá hope de não porta tá hell baby of passive as baby, dus é bom muito que o jongen não tem last de je. Dus que mama te pensa, das llora solamente hora que me se come. Não são samen que tá outra tijd in kuna eigenlijk, no? Te veel hechten aan een vriendin, dus dan tina amiga nang, pero nanta hopi claimen se riba e amiga. E também door nanta bai vanuit ku door nanta lief, e que outro hene não tem malícia ku nang, nanta expect também ku sei e mundo e fota asina. Então, sei tá hasi ora ku toch popotuma nang in de malen, e nós te chama, nós te George tiki ku nanta naïef. Timbia ha separatie angsten die mama. Jora hopi ora na mese bij peuterspeelzaal. Ik cambio bij die kast bij peuterspeelzaal. Timbia ha koptelefoon dat ta usa pata is sensorisch gevoelig. Daarnaast também moeilijk te peilen in wat in hen omgaat. Nanta hopi por ta VWO 3 meisjes, per ora die llega com stress voor die school. Nanta klap dicht en dan op conta precies kiko ta era songnan di kon nanta sinti e dia e portata bin dus bij 2-3 dia kun nan po conta mama precies kiko ta passa. Hopi biaha peki eater tour ta ta peki eater maar echt zoek uit essay ibera tour binti nan ta peki eater pa kiko pa sobre nantin problema que texture usha papi un tiki je saya ore kaba e tambe sameness no nan gusta por ejemplo mi tati un kuta e tal pinda e so eta come e mama na mestra biaha kune ora nan bait kuta e tal merk di pinda ta come outro pinda tampouco. E também toch wel porta koppig estar, met de bisa ku nanta bai mi ho om ku veranderen sin comparar com muito homber, pero também não porque da pegar largo de certo situações, no? Daarnaast bota wak ku nang gusta parsa kikota ze moeten weten wat ze aan toe zijn en not te worden flexibel. Dus por ejemplo, als we doen een vrije opdracht, worden ze helemaal angstig van. Então, sendo se me estruturar me sessi não me tô waku na papia mas também, no? E me teria para a maneira pergunta na maneira para que bota llora, você vai muito mais por llora dentro da câmera, então não vou ponto na pergunta para que bota llora, pero bota uma maneira quase guess, e tinha ver com bo amiga Arábia Cubo awe of porta mami azundrava, então assim na o frau ora nanta tem stress, no? Pessoa ora com na nota tem stress me tô wana papia mais fácil. Pero taba tin kubit nang e choices nang i kasi guessing timbia então timbia nata hopi eerlijk tambe lo que me gusta hopi di nanta nang bot nanta pouco bot e nanti nan trai humor so timbia no turora na escola nanta apreciar sai tampouco tambe ma bisa sai kaba la não tem dificuldade para papia se que ainda não desconheci e tem viajar não prefera para não ter script acaba de na cabeça me te vai festa ave me te vai ganhar tal gente dus ze moeten weten quem tu tá bem então depende que quem bem é festa não tá vai se não também não prefera de que da casa e não tá mãe tampouco não e não por papia bodout se não tem não interesses não o kasi bonota kom ding in gesprek, no? Dan het hoop interessant in interesses, pero abo também que do meio in gesprek, e boto wako sai no tabai. Timbia ora na porting hoop stras, lo que me ta hasi kunan também in praktijk, me ta laga nang skibi, em vez de papia, voor ora na tin stras, so me ta ripara kunan ta hoop mas mi ho ding também ding geschrift ku eigenlijk 1 op 1. E timbia ora come ripara kunan tin hoop stras, me ta laga nang cinta midilanti, me ta pone na cinta na stoel aqui não. E também perfeccionista se fala angstig. Dus beseit in ora na noto score bom riba testa nang dinos wesk por exemplo, pa sombra nang kia tu kos benen na lijn e siendo ku no stopwatch ta corre, no? Anto e sei timbia mita un tiki treki ku e weski ku mita sakafo. Nang kunang gusta hopi biaha ta bestia não, pero a parte dieren, no? Guinea pigs, hond, schildpad, itimja na portin, toch wel turdi nang ku nang ki hinka tur pa ding, mi dati un kai bisa mi efra, mi da prefera laga mi tata nang biba pa fo, I mi best na met een hinka bading. Dus eigenlijk pas sombra ja. Ik zei pa met een naam mas ja toch veiligheid, no? Ik botar essa é um tique estranho, para que não sabe sei. Pero met het de ideale wereld. Kom op kaas het ziet eruit. Eigenlijk mi best in een tour abouw en toen mi tata con mi mama arriba. Hoppie sensitief op sfeer is stemmingen, dus dan te voelen alles. Nou, doet het heel goed op basisschool, 9 en 10 op school. Pero sempre je vrouw naar te remarca, het houdt een tikje verlegen, het houdt een tikje teruggetrokken. Pero no se pensa, het hoort bij meisjes, zeker als we Arubanen zijn, no? Daarnaast, botowaku nieuw tot de ting egulali, loket niet vertraagde egulali, grote onverrijke woorden, Engels, net op een of andere manier, nog steeds bij haar onderzoek met de keren in Caribbean, nanta kies hopi biaha in Engels, hopi biaha mayor nanta bisami asi, portata persona tawa mucho iPad, maybe tasina, pero ma comprende van collega die miku toch e porting die berke mechanische tonku Engels toch dan liever nang tal. Hera nata corrigeer bob, so mi Engels nota je fluent e manenang, hera nampo corrigeer mi tambe kom met de papi Engels. Dus op panang blijkbaar orbas yung foute dingen in Engelse taal, het doet pijn in hun oren, letterlijk. Tambe moeite om hun emoties te herkennen en door die esaki mes met te keren, kupi zij 10 ora, na no sa precies kiko nanta voel, ku esaki porbira ku e por leit na eetstoornis tambe persona nota haya e gevoel ki ora na meste come, pero tambe ja toch emoties, no? Mane ki ora mi sako met bij rabia, ki ora mi sako met tristo, ora mi puntra nang unda bota senti tristeza, mi sako mi wo nanta basha awa. Or mi puntra qualquer gente com não tem autismo, não pode saber duidelijk, uno não sente verdriet. Dus we zijn pergunta na ribe ados, e parte ete e sonku mas me te gusta, kubo wa. Eu vou ver na te explicar me também. Ja, rabia me te sente ding mi cabeça. Of tu me vir basale emoties nang, me te sente ding mi cabeça. Concreet uitleg, ondanks we 3 meisjes die ja met de para, hey, me te puntrando pergunta muito moeilijk, of hoe zit het? En toen me para mais concreet me stel e vragen ang mas nanta papia tambe. E tim viaja na por sinti nervioso, anche con awami mai di 3-4 viaja, nan porta nervioso ainda si me para me pergunta nang te muito vaag of muito algemeen, no? Non-verbaal beter dan jongens, daarnaast oogcontact, nanta hasi oogcontact, ku tibia nanta star, nanta kijk door je heen, una contamu viaja, nanta usa strategieën pa wak bo toch den bokara, e também nanta haya moeilijk pa concentrar lo que abo to papiando, pero também pa volg die lo que ku na meeste pensando den ang cabeça, dus besai ting ora pa na oogcontact nota je facilite tampoco. Sociale angsten, niet weten hoe in een gesprek wat moeten zeggen. Siendo kunanta, nou ja, hoping via porting basta hoge intelligentie. Overprikkeld raken in een groep te zijn. Van tevoren nanta hasi handleiding din ang kabeska wa kuna misse interactua ding een conversação sinam puntra tal pergunta, dus imaginava nanta kana con een handleiding sinam puntra tal pergunta me se contestar saki asina. Dus zij porta hopi vermoeiend panang. Den comunicatie, 10 ora nota fácil pessoa, a mim mesmo prater e me te gusta gente contestar me lihe. Anto me mesmo ja toch sit down, bairiba me mesmo pace. Passo e por dura largo para contestar me pergunta, vooral se het bij over die emotie. Anto ora bopo comisse anders gaat, ja met pensa legt het aan een intelligentie, sim como hasi intelligentie test ainda. Pensei me te gusta hasi toch intelligentie test koe grupo aqui, também te conta de com masoro. E sommige algemene vragen na nota comprende. Meisjes meer op de relatie doen om hen echt erbij te horen. E daarnaast nanta leg el laat hopi halto e nan probeer hopi depressief eigenlijk personen te sinti kunanting algo diferente, no? E het gevoel afgewezen. No school nang awin dia manema bisa min girls nang nota fácil padil kunang. Dus imaginavo si boting algo social. Inanta odia social talk. No puntra nang kwenta di weer of kung abay ko weekend nang kibay sempre ding diepgang, no? Dus nanta mane pere paciëntie toch wel dingen area etambe. Complexiteit binnen de Arubanse context. ACES met keren met varios psicólogos de grupo. Minum se vai portar explica que cultura ACES nang kunos te maken met de nos context. E hoor usje mencionar ja toch wel onderzoek de klem.
Botowak zie, door je zei dat weer mas moeilijk pahasi diagnostiek. Ik zei ouder-kindrelatieprobleem, een hechtingsprobleem, een intergenerationele overdracht van trauma's bij Isla. I nos towak toch wel timbiaha e grupo aki 0 tot 12 jaar is school na noting klachten die nang. Behalve kunanta gewoon verlegen, no? Oké. Vakfouten diagnose den borderline, het parse borderline die kom, we zo'n porting suicidaliteit, een porta met timbiaha in stemmenswisseling. Botowak tambe ku aan respecten biseleidelijk op een mag die stel vast autisme met borderline personality. En met het maas een gespecificeerde persoonlijkheidsstoornis aanke bij jongeren, bono mag die stel vast met zo'n persoonlijkheidsstoornis, pero botowak een bedreigde persoonlijkheids- en ontwikkeling ook bij autisme. No? Door que la maak met tanto afwijzing, pesten, undin een schema, hoop je biahata, sociale isolatie, na nota voel kunanta hoort erbij. Anto kutim biaha, na porsinti un burden pa e sociedad, kunanta decididi bij hasi poging. Sunan kuyega se kanos, hoop je biaha hasi een poging kaba. Kuno aluk gelukkig. Meisjes met as vroege kinderlijke trauma's, wat ik op een persoonlijkheidsproblematiek, persisterende suicidaliteit, itambe eigenlijk no misleid tambe pasoku na porting interpersoonlijke problematiek, door ku eigenlijk nos not te comprender eigenlijk kiko te going on, no? I nanta automutila tambe. Dus per se e por parse borderline personality. I tambe sterke gevoeligheid voor prikkels, ku borderline tambe ting. I sempre verschil taku na mestena handleiding. In momento kom je doen moet je autisme, een handleiding, een structuur, met de waku het bira menos angstig, no? En dus zien we met de purba die recht misessis nan tambe in. Ja, si bewak bon ta pami kuta yudami de me diagnostiek ta mi tom test nang, kuspor yudami como onderscheidende factor. Sakita undi si bewak et talento nan die moet je mohena aki nan ta hopi gefocust riba detalle, anto boto wak toch super bon kunanta pinta, no? Anto tin ora kunan no por papia door die emotie kunanta trankading emotie, met gewoon lagan aan pinta tambe, anto over je zei timbiaha nanta kom los, anto kubo por papia die kiko apasa idee of kiko tabo triggers nang, no? Conclusie, en nu hoe verder? Case overleggen met de haaien timbiaha interinstantia nang, kunos pojuda otro. Consultus instanties, een plan en kind samenwerken. Breng het gedrag in kaart, observaties feitelijk en doorverwijzen. Minuto aspect kunos tuting bij diagnostica, pero si kubota wa kuting algo, anto si boting algo, amelo bisa sempre pratico huisarts of ke majorna, anche majorna tingo rapporting acceptatieproblemen kutahasi zijn te complicaat, no? Denk niet alleen maar aan ASD, dus je psychologo nang, pero me porta en, no? E porting trauma e porting autismo. Dus hij hoeft biaha e por, maar ne mislead nos tambe, die pensa solamente ata trauma met bij behandel, meting e luho dit onder met traga ku me por hasi traumaterapie, después me poschakel over, toch ziet que dat cierto gedrag in me por bij toch ne kind factor. Dus botinko ami hobi biata pensa en, minuto pensa en of. Zeker de comorbiditeit of de complexiteit kom met de haya poli. Tambe e vroege teams van herkenning, misa siku consultatiebureaus dan te zeker met de haya goede verslagen aan de jeugdspecialist, dus de jeugdartsen dan. Iham ha specialisten dan, pero not echt een team kubo te bisa te traga 40 ora ribe area aki. Dus zij helaas no stoer tawak e zij portung issue. Pasomra naast die esaki nos tengo así otro trabajo, no te hace solamente trabajo con autismo, pero me tengo así con ADHD, me tengo trabajo con teenagers nan con trauma, PTSD, no? Entonces sei porta hasi como na Holanda met een collega waar aqui waarnemen psychiater, ta echt sei soita hasi, no? Entonces ta trana leo kandershuis, boto wak me sora que ta wak e kon aqui pasomra ja, eta sei ta sus echt specialistisch, no? Oké, misvatting ook in gender wat as wordt gezien, dit toch niet leven in een as. Dus voor cambia essay, er moet wel lijdensdruk zijn, pameld, sikanos Napoli. Daarnaast comorbiditeit. En met de bisa samper liever geen solo werk met dit soort meisjes. Moet in kutraha de een specialistische team met diverse brillen.
sombra si bota meeting pari colega na tabini hoe biaha que solamente é trauma bril então na no por wak of na nota pensa überhaupt mes riba e autismo. Verder met ik kere e CGT também se nos turta hobby esse colo dan den grupo ta ku ataduna CGT se bota waku é muito a bem pon sociale ans of hobby bem com sociale ans dus bij zij se bota waku not in verandering a me lo pensa ku botin autismo mesora pero botin ku pensa ku lo porti iets meer dan aan de hand. Dus is het waku timbiaha met automatisch met de stap over in autoproef behandeling met de waku is sociale angst te bira menos e por judanang tambe comprendena mes mas eigenlijk. Saita in corto mi presentatie, minsa se tem tempo para pergunta. Yo pergunta, seguro?
All right, un aplauso. Yes, silent applause. Thank you. Masha, thank you, Rosalie. And we continue. We have one more speaker for today. She is a board certified dance movement therapist, a national certified counselor based in California, an adult diagnosed autistic ADHDer. Sarah is a passionate advocate for neurodivergent mental health with over a decade of experience in clinical practice, education, and training. She is the founder and president of Whole You Integrative Health, an organization dedicated to promoting ethical, inclusive care through consultation, coaching, supervision, and education for clinics. Sarah's work centers on supporting neurodivergent and gifted individuals, wow, yes, creatives, and advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion with a focus on LGBTQ+ and racial justice. Sarah has served 2 terms on the board of directors of the American Dance Therapy Association and was named the organization's Leader for Tomorrow in 2014. She is also a 2024 Global Autism Project Skill Corps alumna and a featured guest on their podcast, Autism Knows No Borders. A round of silent applause for Sarah van Koningsveld.
So I'll take these out because I can hear better. Yes, my last name is Dutch. I'm 3rd generation. I never learned the language, and it is very, very unfortunate because I am so impressed by all of you who are multilingual. I will try not to speak too fast, which is also why there's closed captions on the slides. So if I'm speaking fast, hopefully you can read and that will help you keep up, but you will also get access to all the slides. All right. I am here to talk about the adult neurodivergent or autistic woman. And we're going to specifically go over some introduction stuff. I'm going to go over some key terms. We're going to talk about the neurodivergent woman and the identity of being an adult woman that is autistic. And then talking about mental health, treatment, accessibility, and how to support adults that are on the autism spectrum. So this is me. Hi. This is actually the day I received my autism diagnosis officially. I don't look that much different than I do right now, except for my hair's longer. What? Oh, I didn't click. I clicked there. Click. There's me. Multiple things. I don't like looking at that. Yes, so this was me on the day I was diagnosed with autism. I don't look much different except for having long hair. That's because this was only 2 years ago.
I was 38 years old. I had worked as a licensed counselor, dance movement therapist for 10 years. And COVID happened, and a lack of structure, a lack of systems, a lack of routine, my life fell apart. I didn't know who I was anymore. I will also say perimenopause started. So, hormones change, right? Like, I am a whole different person than I was before the pandemic, and it wasn't because I got COVID, it was because it brought up new things within me that I had never had to face. And so that is part of why I'm really passionate about sharing this, both personally, but really professionally, because I think it's really important that we see what can be lost. All right, so I know we've been hearing a lot of these terms today. I'm going to briefly go over some of them. Neurodiversity or neurodiverse just speaks to the idea that all brains are different. Each one of us, much like Carolina was talking about our intersectionality, our neurodiversity is a part of our intersectionality, how our brain works, how we communicate, how we come into the world, right? So that is neurodiversity, or to be neurodiverse. But neurodivergence, or to be neurodivergent, I like the term neurospicy, is to say that you are outside the mainstream, outside the societal norm. You know, if it was a bell curve, most people are in the middle, right? If you're neurodivergent, you're probably on one end or the other and you don't fit in, right? And so that is where the term neurodivergent comes from. All right, neuronormativity is really the idea that there's a normal way to think and be, so neuronormative. And then we have the neurotypical. So the neurotypical would be what isn't neurodivergent, right? So if you aren't on an outlier and you're in the middle of that bell curve, you are considered neurotypical. All right, so there are also two ways that autistics speak of themselves. There is the identity first or the person first. You may have heard me say it, and my introduction is even written that way, that I am autistic. I choose identity first language. However, every person on the autism spectrum, or any person with any disability, may choose to have person first language, and that is okay too. So we're going to talk more about like creating inclusive spaces, but I wanted to put that out there, and that part of being inclusive, part of being supportive to the neurodivergent community is getting to know whether they like identity first or person first. So you can be a person with autism or you can be autistic. I choose autistic. All right. Cool. So I also want to talk a little bit, and we're going to go more into a couple of these things as I go layer my slides. I also want to be really mindful of time. Y'all have been really patient today. So I'm a time person, and I'm going to keep on time. All right. The autism identities. So another kind of reason, and we'll talk more about it, but women can sometimes go undiagnosed in particular, is when they fall into the category of twice exceptional. And so a twice exceptional person, I'm just going to read the definition, is used to describe gifted individuals who may have characteristics that have these characteristics where they are possibly high achieving, they're talented, they're creative, and they have a disability simultaneously. So it's two ends of a spectrum, right? Like talent, gifted, intelligent, disabled, unable to meet expectations, right? And so the exceptions, you know, the part that makes an individual twice exceptional is not just the giftedness is the one end. The other exceptions include the disabilities like specific learning disabilities, speech and language disorders, emotional and behavioral disorders. So some of our like ADHD kiddos, Physical disabilities can make someone twice exceptional. We know that there's limitations there. And then one of the biggest categories where twice exceptional gets used is particularly autism spectrum. So we're going to talk more about that later. But I also want to talk about some terms that get used as part of the autistic identity, but also more broadly in mental health. And one of those is the highly sensitive person. It's not only sensory sensitivity, it can be emotional sensitivity, it can be energetic sensitivity. We know there's the 5 physical senses, but we also have these proprioceptive senses, right, that aren't feeling, seeing, touching. It's energetic, it's more emotional. Then the specific learning disabilities, right, we have dyscalculia, dyslexia, I know there's like 7 and now they're all slipping my mind. So we know those. Sensory processing, right? So that's part of like how things come in through the senses, they're integrated and then they move through. And so some autistic folks may deal more with auditory, processing issues, which is me. Other people might have more visual, touch, right, and how they process that information. And so it might take more time, they might be more sensitive. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria is a new thing that's getting a lot more attention in the autism community. Show of hands, who's heard of rejection sensitivity dysphoria? Great, I get to teach a new word. So rejection sensitivity dysphoria is a heightened sensitivity to perceived or real rejection. So that can include being teased. That can include receiving criticism or feedback. It might not even be harmful. It might be someone being like, thank you so much, and can you do it this way next time? That could be perceived as a rejection. It can also include, it's often seen as, in mental health, that pervasive and persistent negative self-talk and self-criticism. I always do things wrong, I keep messing it up, like, why don't people like me? Rejection sensitivity. And it's seen as a subset in autism, particularly with those who have more verbal and social skills, right? That struggle with social depth, that struggle with social communication, with social cues, can sometimes present itself in the autism identity as a rejection sensitivity. And the last one is PDA, and I don't know if it's similar in Papiamento, but when a lot of people hear that PDA, they're like, ooh, physical touch. No, we're talking a different type of PDA. It's not a public display of affection. It is a persistent drive for autonomy. Has anyone heard that one before? Raise of hands if you've heard of PDA. Fewer people. Okay, so we're going to talk about that one too. Some common characteristics of PDA are anxiety. The anxiety is a drive for control. So it might look like I have to have it my way. So this drive for autonomy, this drive for like an independence is it must be my way. Sounds a little autistic. Social. A person with PDA may be sociable, but could struggle with understanding the complexities of social relationships. So then in this drive for autonomy, they're like, how close, how far, how much, how little, right? And so they want to be independent and have that autonomy, but they have this difficulty. There can be observed significant drastic changes in mood. There can be an impulsivity as a response to that PDA, like if they're feeling like they're not having that autonomy, it can become an impulsive behavior to then be autonomous, to stand their ground. So that could look defiant or resistant. So a lot of individuals who experience PDA, this pervasive and persistent drive for autonomy, can feel with feel comfortable with role play and pretend, but sometimes take it too far. Like, they don't stop the game, they keep going, because they take on a new identity. It is where there can be an overlap in autism in particular with OCD, because there can become obsessive behaviors, controlling behaviors, focused typically on people, because autonomy, right, is self-other, and it can also have elements that look like borderline personality, because they will love or loathe you. Or maybe both, and it just goes hot, cold, because they're driving for the autonomy. It also can lead to resistance in change, and specifically change in routine, right? Autonomy, I want it my way. And then any of these things, right, if it's not going their way, or they're perceiving that like people aren't understanding what they're needing in that moment of autonomy, can lead to the meltdowns and dysregulation, and also panic attacks. So I hope you're already starting to hear how something like PDA as an element of autism can also look like other mental health disorders and diagnoses, right? So we're also going to talk about misdiagnosing and comorbidity, particularly with adults. All right, so that's a little bit of the language that I will be using. So common misdiagnoses, and we've heard already from some amazing presenters that have touched on these things. Typically in women and girls, we see a lot of depression and anxiety before we see autism. We'll also see that OCD, that obsessive control behavior, the need for routine and rigidity. Eating disorders we've talked about, right? This is also can be related to food like sensory elements of eating. Oh, I'm sorry, I have to keep clicking. I forget. There we go. Ta-da. All right, I will click, Carolina, I promise. I'm talking faster than I click. Yeah, so eating disorders like anorexia, right, can be about food sensitivities, control around the food. It could also be related to that PDA, right? Like, I don't want to eat what you give me because I only want to eat what I want to eat because I need autonomy right now. And then PTSD, right, we see the emotional dysregulation, the meltdowns, the difficulty sleeping, a lot of the symptomology that comes with PTSD. The borderline personality, right, so the hot, the cold, the close, the far, the misunderstanding of relationships and connection that come along with borderline, and sleep disorders, particularly with individuals who are both autistic and ADHD. Like, that can be very, very, very complex, because you have the need for routine and then a resistance to routine, and sleep is heavily impacted by both of those things. And we also know that sleep is incredibly important for the brain, and particularly the neurodivergent brain, because it needs a lot more recovery time. So, with saying these are misdiagnoses, we're also saying that, like, a girl or a woman who's being misunderstood, who's coming in and having a sleep difficulty, they're going to be like, she has sleep apnea, here's some sleep medication. A girl who's having trouble with relationships and is feeling really bad about herself and being like, no one likes me, they're going to say that girl has depression. Rosalina told me that I have to talk about this, and it's a perfect time to talk about this. So there's also autistic paralysis, which particularly for women and girls can look like depression, because it feels like you're hopeless. You're not doing your house chores, you're not taking care of yourself, you don't want to go be social. And what it actually looks like is laying on the couch, staring at your ceiling, your brain going, I really want to do something right now. I really want to, like, I should be, I could be, like, there's great food in that refrigerator 10 feet away. My friend called me to go see that movie. My body won't move right now. Why isn't my body moving right now? What's wrong with me? Your brain is telling you all the things you want to do, should do, could do, but there's a physical disconnect with the thought process. This was part of my journey to diagnosis, is my psychiatrist kept saying, "Are you sure you're not depressed? Are you really sure you're not depressed? Like, you keep telling me you don't want to take a shower, and you keep telling me how you're laying on your couch. Are you sure? Like, do you not think of, like, are you not hopeless right now?" I'm like, no. The sun's shining, the birds are singing, I have everything I need. You know, I have that great food in the refrigerator, I have friends that are still calling me to go see movies, but I can't move my body. And so, like, short story on that, it took me 16 months to get a diagnosis. So I know there's timelines that, like, in here in Aruba, I've talked to Carolina that it can take months, years, like that there's weights and things. I also want to just say it happens in the US too, particularly if you're not believed. I had to talk to like 6 professionals before they actually believed me and before I actually got a referral to a psychologist that would diagnose an adult woman. Or just do the testing. I had to do like screeners, and I'm like, every screener said, yeah, she's probably autistic, and I still couldn't get the appointment. So it doesn't just happen here. There's not just delays here. It is really an issue, and it's particularly an issue for girls and women because of the way we present, because of the way we show up in the world, the way we're socialized in the world. All right, so moving on. This also can lead to comorbidity, right? It's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? We know that autism is a neurodevelopmental disorder. I will click. There we go. I now see Carolina in my head, and so association. I don't mask anymore, y'all. This is what you get. So the same things that are being diagnosed and could be considered misdiagnosis are often also a comorbidity. Again, like the chicken or the egg, right? Neurodevelopmentally, autism is a lifelong disorder. It gets diagnosed in the medical model whenever it does. But when we think about like socializing and bonding with parents early in childhood, when we think about the situations and circumstances a person might be in as an undiagnosed person, right? That can lead to PTSD, that can lead to trauma, it can lead to anxiety, it can lead to depression, and then there really is both, right? It's an autistic person who's been traumatized. It's an autistic person who really is anxious and afraid of doing things wrong or not being good enough. And so just one example of how a misdiagnosis is also a comorbidity here is like that sometimes self-injurious behavior can be misattributed to like borderline and attention seeking and that, you know, like control part, without the provider actually considering how that self-injurious behavior is actually a presentation of the autism and not understanding what's going on in the brain and the body, and so they're harming themselves, right? And needing that outlet for that energy. So I mentioned masking and camouflaging, so we'll talk a little bit about it. At its core, by definition, they're actually 2 different things. Camouflaging is most often, at least in the States, they use what's called the CAT-Q, C-A-T-Q, which means Camouflaging Autistic Traits Questionnaire. It is it's developed for adults on the spectrum because over the lifespan, individuals do learn more masking skills, and particularly women and girls. We learn to sit, be quiet, be nice, smile, don't talk, don't fidget, right? And we have certain expectations in our academics. We have certain expectations in our homes, right? And we could attribute some of that to the dominance of patriarchal culture, right? And how women are to act in those societies, regardless of how progressive we start to become. And there's 3 elements that they look for in the CAT-Q, and the first element is the element of compensation. So how much is that adult compensating with their behavior to adjust to social situations, the workplace, etc.? The second element is the masking element, right? So camouflaging is the overarching, masking is a specific element. And that is the monitoring one's own behavior, including eye contact, facial expression, and gestures, to meet the social cues and social expectations of non-autistic, neurotypical individuals. So one of the first pieces of feedback I got after getting my evaluation results was, I noticed how hard you try to make eye contact. You've learned very well in 38 years to look at people when they talk to you and ask you questions, you know, and there's an element of me that loves making eye contact, and I'm sure the individuals that I've talked to since I've been here the last few days have noticed that I can't maintain that very long. I try because it's what's expected of me, right? And so I have mastered masking when it comes to social expectations in my culture, in my community. So that's element 2. And element 3 is assimilation. And so assimilation is the behavioral techniques that are used to fit in better with other people. So forcing yourself to act or perform and pretend. And so when we think about that imitation, copying, and compensation, we can also see why that might lead someone to be depressed, to be anxious, and to be traumatized by the experience over time. Because it's this constant, you're being someone else, like all day long. You're not actually in your body experiencing what's going on because you've put on these layers. We all put on layers, let's just be honest, we all put on layers, you know, like you're different in your professional setting than you are at home, than you are with your lover and partner, than you are with your bestie, right? Like, we all wear masks. However, the CAT-Q in particular looks at how deep do those masks go and how much are they impacting the person's ability to be themselves, to know themselves, and really live with integrity, that like true sense of integrity. Yeah. All right. So, going to talk a little bit about executive functioning. There's a lot of overlap in executive functioning between ADHD and autism, because it's part of the learned developmental piece of these particular neurodevelopmental diagnoses. And so there's 3 levels. I'm not going to read them all, but there's 3 levels to all executive functioning. So any one of these things have 3 levels of presentation. I'm sorry, I forgot to click. I'm going to get trouble. Okay, so the 3 levels are starting or beginning. So starting to express emotion and self-regulate, like starting task initiation. The second one is sustaining or continuing it. So it's one thing to be able to self-monitor. It's another thing to continue to self-monitor over time. Then there's the stopping or the task switching. And so in each of these, there's an element where you go from maybe using working memory to going into organization to mental flexibility. Like you have to stop one thing to start another. And children learn these things in the home. They learn these things in school. It is something we learn throughout our lives. Like no one stops learning these things. We all continue to get better when we're exposed to different situations, circumstances, occupations, careers, friends, whatever it might be, right? Like we all have our strengths in these areas, in certain areas of executive functioning. We also have challenges in certain areas of executive functioning. I was hoping that we would do like a little self-study on executive functioning, but we don't have time. But I'm happy to share it with you if you'd all like to do it at some other time for yourself. But again, we all have strengths, we all have weaknesses and areas for growth. But what we see in autistic folks is a delay in the development of executive functioning, even in the areas of strength. So it is one way that particularly in mental health, as a therapist, I work with my neurodivergent clients. It looks a lot more task-oriented in the therapy session, but I'm working on building up these executive functioning skills, building up the awareness around these executive functioning skills, helping them to pull from their strengths so that they can go into areas of weakness with confidence, right? Because we're not going to be able to master all of them, but what we want to see is progress in the areas where they can feel more confident, they can gain more independence, right? Like they can feel like they can manage this, or at least have systems and structures in place that make it completely possible, you know? Yeah, I could give examples, but we don't have time. Thank you. I have the remote. I'm going to switch hands, because then maybe I'll just click. All right, so I want to talk a little bit about the 2E identity as it relates to women. So again, there's the talented and gifted piece, and then there's the disability piece. And so this is Seth Perler's example, but I'm just going to read a little bit about the 2E identity. So individuals who are identified as twice exceptional tend to have more, and this is going to have some brain language for those of you who like neurobiology and brain stuff. So they tend to have more efficient brains because their brains tend to prune more neurons. And we know neural pruning is great for brain growth, right? Okay, they have a larger corpus callosum. They tend to have an overwhelmed and overworking prefrontal cortex, which leads to poor self-regulation and organization skills. They tend to have an emotional intensity due to a larger amygdala. They tend to be reactive in social situations because of the hypothalamus and limbic system. Their perfectionism comes from an overactive basal ganglia. Their creativity and talents come from supramarginal gyrus and a right parietal lobe interconnectivity. So the right brain's doing a whole lot of stuff. And then they have the cortex in the brain varies in thickness, which isn't seen as much in the general population. So there's a variation in the thickness of the cortex, which can lead to overexcitability. All right, so I know that was a lot of brain language, but what's really interesting about it is that again, these are the individuals that are outliers. And so when we think of what commonly gets diagnosed as autistic, I'm going to try to mirror this, pardon if I get backwards, right? So we have everybody in the middle, and we tend to have like those with higher need, higher learning disability, like lower functioning, more difficulties down here, right? And then on this side, we have individuals that are articulate and social and extroverted and energetic and talented. They play music, they learn languages, they travel the world and come give workshops, right? And they don't look autistic. And so that's the 2E identity, right? That there's so much more going on in the brain in a different kind of way, right? We all got stuff in the brain, but a 2E person has all those other things happening at the same time. Going to click. All right, and so just briefly, I'm not going to again read about this, but often in education, you know, when we see a person with any sort of learning disability or behavioral issue, they often get the special education, the speech pathology, the OT, whatever the case might be, whatever the school is able to offer, whatever their, healthcare is able to provide them to get that support. But when we see the gifted identity, there's like this loss because they're performing well in school, they're, engaged in extracurricular activities. They're curious about, reading books and learning, instruments or whatever the case might be, because they have that love of learning. They have a curiosity. They have this internal world that's so colorful that they're just like, ooh, And so on the flip side, they can also be really rigid. And so then what you end up seeing is like, forget who I was talking to, but we were talking about my report card as a kid. My mom gave me a whole box of my stuff from my childhood, and I looked at my report card, and it was like, exceptional student, performs above average, talks too much and distracts everyone. Highly talented and articulate, won't sit still in class. Whatever the case, so it's this both. It's this both, and they're willing to, because of the giftedness, often in academia, they're willing to ignore all that other stuff and not actually take it serious as that's a problem. Like, why is this really intelligent kid, having a hard time socially or I talked to the class clown that was, failing. Why? I don't need him as my friend, but that's who I talked to in class because he would listen to me when I was, bored, And so, this is where we can grow as professionals, is to recognize when dichotomies exist like that we're dealing with we're potentially dealing with that subset of individuals who's a both and. They may be in that twice exceptional space. Okay, I know, I'm out of time. So I'm gonna go into some treatment things and then we'll wrap up. I think I have 4 slides left. Okay, click. All right, so some things we can do as providers. These are slides specifically for us, is to consider our 5 barriers to compassion. We have 5 main reasons where we might lack that compassion. We had the example of Maria earlier, and her doctor did not have much compassion, right? Why? So one of the elements is fear. Sometimes we're fearful of things. When we don't understand, we get afraid. We might have ignorance. We might not know. We might not understand. We might not have the information. That's vulnerable. 3, aversion. It's like, I don't deal with that. I don't like it, right? And then we can have this attachment. And the attachment is a combination of both desire and egoism. And really what that's talking about is that we have this strong desire to help people and change the world, right? And then our egoism is like, but this is what I know. I know what I was taught in school. I know what I've seen in autism, and this isn't it, right? So in some ways, our ego can get in the way, and our own desire to be a helper can actually get in the way of providing effective care. And so just something to consider is maybe where your barriers to compassion are, or where maybe you can challenge yourself a little bit more, to think outside the box when it comes to what autism might look like. All right. So under the medical model, impairments and differences are often said to be needing to be fixed, needing to be changed. There is something wrong. And so in autistic individuals, this can particularly cause pain and trauma, in the case of Maria, to not be heard, to not be seen, to not, have someone who is curious and compassionate in that space. We can actually perpetuate some of the mental health needs, the mental health challenges that person is already experiencing. More of that depression, more of that anxiety, more of that trauma is happening over and over again. And so, this is another reason why it is so important. I do put some examples of ways to create safe treatment. So emphasizing, I mentioned emphasizing soft skills and executive functioning is a great way to come into treatment empathically, compassionately, and supportive. It doesn't look like, if you are a psychologist or a psychotherapist, it does not look like deep processing. It looks like very different therapy. But believe you me, a therapist that shows up when you say, I really just want to feel more in control and more organized and more like calm about my life, like that is therapy, right? That is so healing to know someone's on the other side willing to do those basic social emotional learning, life skill work with them. Because especially as an adult, if you haven't gotten that, you may really need it at this point to live out your life to the best of its ability. I love this image of, I'm clicking. Yes, I love this image of the window of tolerance. It's based on Daniel Siegel's work, but it's really about the nervous system and regulation. When a person has experienced trauma, their brain is more like the side on the little window on the right here. I can use the pointer, this one, right here, where there's, when someone's experienced stress and trauma, their window gets really small, right? Like they don't have a lot of tolerance for things that are different. You think of an autistic person that's maybe been traumatized in certain settings over and over and over again, they're probably on that left side, right? And then we see more meltdowns, we see more acting out, we see more big emotions. And then with support, with compassion, with healthy healing spaces, we get more of what's on this right side. We get a person that has more tolerance for the world, more tolerance for their life, more tolerance for others, more opportunities for growth and change. And so just also thinking about it therapeutically, like that we really want to regulate the autonomic nervous system. I'm going to try to say it. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn response. That is something I like autonomic nervous system. Give me brain language. So yeah, we are able to, in those therapeutic spaces, enhance the ability to regulate. Next is just a brief summary of the client affirming care or the patient affirming care model. Having humility, having charity, and having veracity in your therapeutic space, like recognizing that you are not the expert in your client's life. You might have a lot of education, you might have medical skills, you might have a bunch of credentials, but really sitting back, really hearing the person, really showing up for what they need in that really safe way. And then there's the trauma-informed care model. This is one of my favorites. So I'm going to read the little words because I know they're small. But first we have safety, right? Creating safe spaces. We're going to talk a little bit how that would look. Then we have trustworthiness. So creating trust in those spaces that, trust is bidirectional. Peer support. As an individual provider, you may not offer peer support. I've developed an offer bi-weekly, so every other week, adult diagnosed women's support group. It is just a 90-minute meeting of women over the age of 20 who identify as autistic, who want community and want space to talk about some of the challenges they've experienced throughout their lives. But maybe for children, like having children's groups and things, facilitated safe spaces for peer support and understanding. Collaboration is super important to trauma-informed care. Again, no one's the expert but the client, but they need your professional expertise to succeed. So work together. Empowering, we saw that in PDA there's this drive for autonomy. So how do you use that collaboration and trust to also empower? Empower clear boundaries, empower clear articulation of that autonomy they need, empower our clients to advocate for themselves in ways that make them feel good. And then lastly is humility, right? So sitting back, recognizing our own bias, our own weaknesses, our own areas for growth. I have 2 slides. So the social model of care, we've talked about the medical model, we touched on the social model, but I'm just going to enhance it here around neurodiversity. In the, there's this shift, right? Once we've been it's okay to be autistic. You know, the DSM-5 came out and it gave this new broader definition of autism spectrum disorder. Then there became this whole thing that like, but autism is your superpower. Your brain can do all these things. It's like, yeah, and I still can't do a lot of other things, right? It's not a superpower. There's still, as much as there might be abilities that are enhanced, the ability to have a special interest and hyper-focus and get something done in half the time of someone else is amazing. The burnout, not so much, right? And so it's not a superpower. So how do we, again, use that empowerment, use that safety to help a person create balance and create understanding of where their strengths are and where they recuperate. I guess I also want to highlight the decentering the neurotypical narratives about neurodivergence and just enhance the idea that no one knows what it's like to be neurodivergent or autistic except for the person living in that body and that brain. And so we might have these doctors, scientists, researchers, amazing people doing amazing things. I'm not discrediting any of their work in publications. But if you really want to know what it's like to be autistic, ask the autistic person. Because that's just studies, data, and numbers, right? It's a foundation, but it's not everything. Lastly, in the social model, there is nothing to cure about autism. It is just a different type of brain. And so how do we, going back to where Carolina started, how do we hold space for the differences in people, in their brains, and step away from like the curing autism and really go into that space of justice, that space of inclusivity, that space of equity, so that autistic people have the opportunities that they deserve. I think if I had found out I was autistic at like 8, 9, 10 years old, I probably wouldn't be here. My life needed to go on the path that it did, and I needed to fall apart when I fell apart. And I also think back about, what if that teacher noticed? What if I was assessed at 8, 9, 10 years old when I was having the troubles that I did? What supports would I have gotten? What, educational needs might have been met? How maybe my parents have parented differently. And I don't blame any of these people. I'm a child of the 90s when autism was like, the 80s and the 90s, but like autism wasn't talked about. Autism was the boys that got in trouble and did certain things or had trouble with language or whatever the case might be. It was a lot of the extreme cases, right? And so I don't think there's anything broken about myself or any autistic person. So ensuring and like challenging our own language and our own thoughts. I even am doing this constantly clinically, right? Like I learned the medical model to be a psychotherapist, to be a clinician. And I have to undo some of that learning of my own culture, my own education, to also give myself compassion as I'm 40 years old. So I talked about a lot of these things about creating safe and supportive spaces, but I also just want to highlight, I appreciate the silent applauses. I appreciate the dimmed lights. These conference rooms can be awful when they turn the lights all the way up. Whew, I get migraines. Creating those inclusive spaces include, again, just asking if it's the identity first or the person first language that feels best. Allowing for the body autonomy and the stimming to happen as it happens. I move a lot when I talk because it's how I stim. You never know because I just go like this all the time. And, I'm also a dancer. Like, I danced from the age of 2, and I have a bachelor's degree in dance. Like, dancing was my stimming. I didn't need to stim because I danced like 10 hours a week. So, like holding space for what individuals need with their bodies at different times. Yeah, and that's about all I got. So I thank you for being patient through the delays, and I'll change this because then see, I forgot to click. There's the summary. You get the summary slide too. And that was the activity, but here we go. So, yeah, thank you so much. I don't know if we have any closing words, but I appreciate you all.
Thank you very much. Masha danki po sa presensya. Awe tardi. Danki na Carolina. Danki na Ushi. Danki na Rocheline. Na Sara. Ina cada uniboso ko asinda awe tardi a compartir a tarde que conosco. Me espera que a informação está valiosa, mesmo valiosa que está para nós também. Se tem qualquer pergunta, a tarde vai hopefully e por imaginar que você tem pergunta, você tem nos email address, sintivo livre para mandar um email. Pasina po por haya contesta, nos lo by network award aqui rato. Dus timbia, ting snacks, enjoy, conversar, se pergunta e vez mais, hopi danki, de parte da Fundação Autismo.
Thanks, Teresa, for the MC duties, and thanks to everybody who attended the workshop today. I just forgot one more thing to say before we begin working for today. Tomorrow, I'm going to have another episode of Stima un Autista on Cool FM 98.9, in which the two of the three speakers who you just listened today will be in tomorrow's episode. Sarah Everkonisveld and Roshni de Cuba, along with Kay Kwandas, my colleague ambassador, will talk about the importance of girls and autism. Make sure you guys have to tune in at 10:15 in the morning tomorrow morning on Cool FM 98.9 on the dial, or on coolaruba.com for audiovisual content, and also on social media. So I'm inviting you guys to listen tomorrow at Stima Ngotista at 10:15 a.m. on Cool FM, and I hope that you can listen, the more important on the autism and girls. And just for FYI, I typed on the questions during the presentations, so sorry about that. Okay? Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you all real soon. Don't forget tomorrow, 10:15 a.m. on Cool FM.